Picture a room about the size of a tennis court. Low ceiling, stone walls sweating with condensation, windows so fogged with steam you can't tell if it's day or night outside. Now fill it with 12 copper vats the size of bathtubs, each one boiling at a temperature that will peel the skin from your hand if you lean too close. Add the smell of lye soap and wet wool, and something underneath both of those things that you'll learn to stop noticing after the first week, though you never quite do. Add the sound of cloth being beaten against stone, rhythmic and merciless, like a punishment that has no end. Add 40 women and girls in identical grey dresses, moving through the steam like ghosts who forgot they were dead. That's the workhouse laundry. That's where you are tonight. Not as a visitor, not as a reformer with a notebook, not as one of the charitable ladies who sometimes tours the facilities with handkerchiefs pressed to their noses and expressions of calculated concern. You're here because you had no other choice. You're here because the city ran out of other places to put you. You're here because in Victorian London, in the year 1868, the distance between a respectable life and this stone room is shorter than anyone comfortable will ever admit. We're going back tonight. One day, one person. Everything they would have seen, smelled, touched, and barely survived. I make these history stories and I honestly don't know if you're listening to fall asleep or if you're lying there wide awake in the dark, curious about what happened to the people the history books forgot, the ones whose names didn't make it onto monuments, the ones whose work kept the city running while the city pretended they didn't exist. Either way, settle in, get comfortable, which is already more than she had. Here we go. Your name is Ellen Marsh. You're 17 years old. You have been inside the Lambeth workhouse for 11 weeks, 3 days, and approximately 4 hours, though you've stopped counting with any precision, because counting makes the time move slower, and slower is the one thing you cannot afford. You did not arrive here voluntarily. Nobody does. Not really, whatever the parish records say. You arrived here because your father died of consumption in February. Your mother followed him 6 weeks later, which the doctor called coincidence, and which, was grief. And after that there was your younger brother Thomas, who is 8 years old, and the two of you together in the room above the Chandlers on Waterloo Road, with 4 shillings and 7 pence between you and a landlord who was not an unkind man but was not a foolish one either. Thomas is in the children's wing. You're allowed to see him on Sundays for 30 minutes, supervised. He is getting enough to eat. You hold on to that fact like a coin in your fist. The morning bell rings at 5:30, which you know not by any clock but by the quality of the darkness through the dormitory window. The darkness in late autumn has a particular texture to it, something between black and grey like old iron, and the bell slices through it the way cold cuts through thin cloth. You are already awake. You've been awake since approximately 4, lying on your back on the narrow iron cot with the straw mattress that has been compressed by years of other women's bodies into something with all the give of a wooden plank, staring at the ceiling and listening to the breathing of the other women around you. 23 women in this dormitory. Some of them snore. The woman in the cot nearest the window, a large, slow-moving Irish woman named Bridget, who has been here 3 years, and treats the place with the resigned familiarity of someone who has simply decided this is home now, talks in her sleep. Not words you can make out, just murmuring, the sound of a conversation happening somewhere you cannot reach. You swing your legs over the side of the cot. Your feet find the stone floor. The cold comes up through your feet immediately, direct and total, the way cold does when it has all night to settle into stone. It travels up through your ankles, your shins, and lodges somewhere in your knees, which have been aching for the past month in a way that feels older than 17. The dormitory is heated by a single fireplace at the far end. At 5:30 in the morning, the fire's been out for hours. Your breath makes small clouds in the air. You reach under the cot for your shoes, which you keep there because the dormitory matron, Mrs. Price, has noted that shoes left anywhere else have a tendency to migrate. Mrs. Price herself is not a thief, but this place collects people in various states of desperation, and desperation changes the moral mathematics of small decisions in ways you're still learning to account for. Your shoes are stiff and cold, leather gone hard from steam exposure and repeated wetting and inadequate drying. You lace them with fingers that already feel thick and slow, the knuckles still swollen from yesterday's work. The first lacing attempt fails. You try again. The bow holds. Your dress is grey wool, workhouse issue, roughly woven and sized for someone considerably larger than you, so that it hangs from your shoulders in a way that makes you look like a child wearing a mother's clothes, which is, you suppose, more or less what you are. Under it a shift of rough linen, over it a coarse apron that was white once, and is now the colour of old dishwater, regardless of how much you wash it, which is a particular irony given your circumstances. You stand up. Your back registers the movement with a familiar catalogue of complaints. Between the shoulder blades first, where the tension from yesterday's wringing has settled into something approaching permanence, then lower at the small of it, from hours of bending over the wash copper. Then the shoulders themselves, heavy and tight, the muscles there having been asked to do things that muscles were not designed to sustain for 10 hours at a stretch. You've been 17 for 2 months. Your back feels 40. The dormitory begins to stir around you. Other women sitting up, swinging legs over cot edges, performing the same cold floor ritual in the same half-dark. No one speaks much in the first minutes of the morning. Language requires a kind of energy that sleep hasn't yet returned. The morning routine, if you can call it that, is 15 minutes. That's all they give you. 15 minutes between the bell and the requirement to be standing in line outside the laundry door. In those 15 minutes you must wash your face and hands at the communal basin at the end of the dormitory, which holds water that was cold last night and is colder now, and which must serve 23 women in sequence. You are neither near the front of that queue nor near the back. The water you wash in is grey from other people's washing. It does the job, technically speaking. You wet your face. The cold hits your skin like a small controlled shock, drawing you properly awake in the way that no amount of willpower can quite manage. You rub your hands together under the water, feeling the familiar roughness of your own palms. You had soft hands once, or so it seems to you now, though perhaps that's just what the past looks like when the present is this. You dry your face on the rough towel that hangs from the nail above the basin, shared between all 23 women, and which smells of other people's mornings. Breakfast is at 6:15 after the first hour of work. This is the arrangement. You work first, you eat after. The logic of the workhouse is that gratitude should precede reward, that a body must justify its feeding before it receives it. You've been hungry every morning for 11 weeks. Not the kind of hungry that is an inconvenience. The kind that sits in the centre of your body and becomes its own persistent companion. But right now, there's no time to think about breakfast. Right now there's the line forming in the corridor outside. The grey figures of women assembling with the mechanical precision of people who have given up fighting the machinery and simply let it carry them. You fall in. The laundry is in the basement of the main workhouse building. To reach it, you descend 2 flights of stone stairs that have been worn smooth in the middle by decades of feet, the edges still sharp. The walls here are whitewashed stone, the whitewash applied in successive generations of institutional optimism, layer upon layer, so that in places where it has chipped, you can see the strata of previous versions of this same clean-looking surface. Clean-looking. That's the workhouse aesthetic throughout. Everything is designed to look clean. The surfaces, the uniforms, the records. The smell reaches you before the door does. It comes up the stairs ahead of you, rising with the heat like something alive. And it is not quite one smell, but several braided together into a single overwhelming impression. Steam first, the thick, wet heat of it, and underneath that the alkaline bite of washing soda which gets into the back of your throat and stays there. Then something organic and harder to name, the smell of the actual labour, of bodies that have been sweating in enclosed spaces for hours, of wet cloth dried and re-wetted and dried again. And under all of it, fainter but permanent, the institutional smell that is present in every corner of this building, a combination of carbolic, old stone, tallow candles, and something you can only call the smell of many people existing in close proximity without sufficient anything. You push through the door. The heat is physical, immediate. After the cold of the dormitory and the cold of the corridor, the laundry hits you like walking into a wall of warm fog. Your lungs recalibrate. Your cold, stiffened fingers begin to unknot just slightly. There is a moment, just one, where the warmth feels almost good. Then your eyes adjust, and you see the room in its fullness, and the moment passes. The Lambeth Workhouse laundry handles not only the linen of the workhouse itself, its dormitory sheets, the nightgowns of the inmates, the shirts and aprons and table linens, but also the contracted washing from 3 local hospitals. This is the arrangement the Parish Board of Guardians made some years ago as a measure of self-sufficiency, of making the workhouse pay for its own upkeep by selling the labour of its inmates to institutions that need clean things and prefer not to pay full wages for the cleaning of them. This means the laundry never runs out of work. It means the copper vats are never cold. It means that in the corner by the far wall, the pile of incoming dirty laundry, which arrives in large canvas bags each morning and sits in its heap like something that has given up the hope of ever being better, is never entirely absent. The hospital linen is the worst part of the work. You know this already. You've known it since your 3rd day, when you were assigned to the sorting table and discovered what hospital linen means in practice. It means sheets from surgical wards. It means nightgowns from the fever rooms. It means the residue of illness and injury and death that must be soaked and boiled and pounded until it is white again, until the evidence of suffering is removed so completely that the sheet can be used again by the next person, who will leave their own evidence upon it in their turn. You try not to think about where these sheets have been. You try this every morning with varying degrees of success. The overseer of the laundry is a woman named Mrs. Garvey. She's perhaps 55, though hardship ages in ways that confuse the calculations, and she may be less. She has grey hair pulled so tightly back from her face that looks like it would hurt to have, a jaw that appears to have been constructed with thrift in mind, and eyes the colour and warmth of a February puddle. She has been the laundry overseer for 11 years. She knows every shortcut, every hidden corner, every woman's weak point. She's not cruel in the way that involves pleasure. She's efficient in the way that involves complete indifference to the experience of the people around her. She's standing at the front of the laundry when you file in, arms folded across her chest, watching you all take your positions with the expression of someone watching a mechanism either function or fail to function. Marsh. She says your surname the way everyone here says names, not as identification but as categorization. The same tone she'd use to say copper or mangle. A type of object being directed to its proper function. Sorting table today. The hospital bags from St. Thomas's came in late last night. There's a full count waiting. You nod. You don't say anything. You have learned in 11 weeks that speaking to Mrs. Garvey is a transaction with a very poor exchange rate. The sorting table is a long wooden table, scarred and stained, at the near end of the laundry. Your job this morning is to open the canvas bags from St. Thomas's Hospital and sort their contents into categories: sheets to the copper, smaller items to the hand-washing tubs, heavily soiled items to be soaked first in the preparation tubs where the washing soda mixture has been sitting overnight. You pull on the rubber gloves. They're thick and stiff and slightly too large for your hands, so your fingers sit in them with a gap at each fingertip that makes fine manipulation difficult. They smell of the rubber they're made from, a dark industrial smell, and underneath that the carbolic solution they were last disinfected with. You pull them on anyway. You have seen what sorting without them does to hands. You untie the first bag. The smell that comes out is the smell of a hospital ward at night, distilled and concentrated by the canvas and the journey. Sour and medicinal, and underneath both of those things, something rawer, more animal that the carbolic has not quite suppressed. You breathe through your mouth. Everyone does at the sorting table. It's an unspoken adaptation, learned fast. The first sheet is white, or was white, with brown staining along one edge that your hands know before your mind does. Surgical ward. You put it in the copper pile without looking at it too carefully. The second is a nightgown, small, which means the children's ward. This requires a different kind of not thinking about it, one that has its own particular discipline. You sort steadily. Your hands learn the rhythm quickly, the way hands do when the work is repetitive enough that the brain can step back slightly and let the body manage. Open, assess, sort. Open, assess, sort. The pile grows on each side of you. The bag empties. You reach for the next one. Around you, the laundry is finding its morning rhythm. The copper tenders, the 2 women assigned to manage the great boiling vats, are loading the first batch of pre-sorted whites into the water, using long wooden paddles to push them down into the boil. The paddles are heavy, arm-length things, and the work of stirring wet cloth in boiling water requires a constant effort of the shoulders and back that never quite becomes easy, only becomes familiar. You can see Mary Doyle working one of the coppers from here, her face red from the steam, her arms moving in the deliberate circles of someone pacing themselves against the length of the day. Mary Doyle is 26 and has been in the workhouse for 6 years. She was admitted at 20 with 2 children, which happens in ways the workhouse records describe neutrally, and life describes otherwise. The children are grown enough now to be in service. She stays. She knows the laundry as well as Mrs. Garvey does, better in some ways, and gets 4p a week of what they call pocket money for her expertise, which is the workhouse system's way of acknowledging skill while preserving the fiction that it owes you nothing. She nods at you as you glance up from the sorting table. A small nod, economical. The kind of communication that has been stripped of everything unnecessary. You nod back. The sorting takes you until approximately 7. Your count this morning is 47 sheets, 32 nightgowns and shifts, 16 towels, and a number of smaller items you enter in the tally book that sits at the end of the sorting table. The tally book is your responsibility in addition to the sorting. Mrs. Garvey does not do paperwork herself. She assigns it to whoever she judges literate enough to manage it without making a mess of the columns, and she assigned it to you in your second week, which was recognition of a sort, though not one that came with any privileges. At 7:15, a girl named Agnes brings a tray from the kitchen. Agnes is 14 and works in the kitchen, which is a better posting than the laundry in some respects and worse in others. The tray holds 42 bowls of porridge, which is the number of women currently assigned to the laundry. The porridge is grey, the colour of the sky before rain, and has the consistency and approximately the flavour of wet plaster. It is hot, which matters more than the flavour matters. You eat standing up. This is not a rule exactly. There are no stools or chairs in the laundry. There is a wooden bench along one wall, but the bench exists primarily as a place to set things, and sitting on it during working hours would require a sort of defiance that the space does not encourage. So you stand, holding the bowl with both rubber-gloved hands removed, the porridge warming your palms from the outside, and you eat. 7 minutes. That's the reality of breakfast. You eat in 7 minutes because the work does not wait for you to finish, and the copper tenders need the first batch stirred, and the hand-washing tubs need filling, and the day is already behind itself before it has properly started, as the laundry day always seems to be behind itself, as if it set off running before dawn and has never caught up. You put down the empty bowl and pull your gloves back on. Now the hand-washing tubs. These are wooden tubs, large ones, chest high when you're standing and filled to within 6 inches of the rim with water that has been heated in the adjacent copper and transferred by bucket. The transfer is done by the newest and most junior inmates, at the moment 2 women who arrived last month, one old enough to be your grandmother and one who looks to be about your age and has not spoken a word to anyone since she arrived, and they carry the buckets in a continuous chain that keeps the tubs at working temperature, which is hot enough to clean and hot enough to redden your forearms to the elbow and maintain that redness throughout the day. The hand washing is for items too delicate for the copper, which is a relative term in this context. Delicate here means things that would dissolve entirely in the boiling vat rather than merely shrink. Lace, sometimes. Finer linens. Wool items that have been sent by better households than usual, which happens occasionally when the workhouse takes in laundry from private clients, as well as the hospital contracts. Your specific job at the hand-washing tub is what they call the rub. You take each item, submerge it, apply the soap, and work it between your hands, rubbing cloth against cloth in a circular motion that is supposed to dislodge dirt through friction. The soap is grey soap, made on the premises, a hard block that has been roughly cut into work-in pieces. It does not lather prettily. It is functional, chemical, and it strips the oil from your skin with such efficiency that by midday the skin between your fingers is dry and cracked, and by evening it will be bleeding at the knuckles if you're not careful, and sometimes if you are. You've learned to wet your hands before putting them in. You've learned to work quickly, so they're not submerged longer than necessary. You've learned that the bleeding knuckles benefit from being held briefly over the steam from the copper before bed, which keeps them from cracking further overnight. Mary Doyle taught you this. She taught you most of the things that actually matter in here, the adaptations that don't appear in any rulebook because they require the kind of knowledge that can only be acquired by having your hands damaged in this specific way, repeatedly for years. You work at the tub. The motion is repetitive enough that it becomes almost automatic, your hands learning the rhythm and executing it while your mind goes somewhere else. This is a skill you've been developing since you arrived, the ability to perform the work with your body while your thoughts are elsewhere. It's a survival mechanism. The women who can't separate the two, who are fully present in every moment of the work, seem to suffer more, or maybe they suffer differently. It's hard to say with confidence, where do your thoughts go? Mostly to Thomas, 8 years old and in the children's wing, which you know from your Sunday visits is a large cold room with 30 other children in various states of bewilderment and acquiescence. Thomas has adapted better than you expected. He has a friend there, a boy named Clem, who lost his own parents to a fever. The two of them have developed the kind of immediate practical friendship that children form in difficult circumstances, built on proximity and shared trouble and the instinct to find something to laugh about even when the material is scarce. He does not look unhappy on Sundays. This is the most important information you have. He looks thin and he looks pale, and he looks like he is engaged in the project of growing up in a difficult place with the pragmatic flexibility that children manage better than adults most of the time. You think about that and keep rubbing. The first real catastrophe of the morning happens at approximately 8:30. It involves the mangle. The mangle is the largest piece of equipment in the laundry, a cast iron machine that stands against the far wall like something that belongs in a factory rather than a washing room. It is a compression device, essentially. 2 heavy rollers, top and bottom, that squeeze water out of wet cloth as it passes between them. The rollers are turned by a hand crank on one side, which requires sustained effort, and you feed the cloth in from one side and collect it on the other. The point is to remove water more efficiently than wringing by hand, which it does, taking heavy sodden sheets and pressing them to a state where they're merely damp rather than dripping, ready for the drying racks. The mangle is also the most dangerous piece of equipment in the laundry. Everyone knows this. The danger is not obscure or theoretical. The rollers turn and they do not care what passes between them. Cloth goes through them easily. Fingers go through them less easily, but with consequences that are not discussed in polite company. There is a girl named Harriet who works the mangle. She is 15, compact and efficient, and she has been doing this particular job for 3 months, which is long enough to know it, but perhaps not long enough to be perfectly careful about it at all times. The problem this morning is that Harriet is tired. The problem this morning specifically is that she didn't sleep well because the woman in the cot next to hers was ill in the night, coughing. The kind of cough that has a wet depth to it that doesn't suggest anything good, and the sound went on for hours, and Harriet lay listening to it and eventually gave up on sleep somewhere around 3. So when she feeds the sheet through the rollers at 8:30, and her right hand goes slightly too far in with the cloth, she doesn't catch it in time. The sound is what you hear first, not a cry, not immediately. Just a different quality to the mangle's rhythm, a slight irregularity in the turning of the crank, and then a sharp intake of breath from the direction of the far wall. Then Harriet's voice, very controlled, which is somehow worse than if she'd screamed. "Stop!" The word lands in the laundry like something dropped. Everyone hears it. The women nearest the mangle understand first, and one of them, an older woman named Ruth, grabs the crank and reverses it immediately, and everyone holds the particular quality of stillness that a potential disaster creates. You are across the room. You see it from a distance. Harriet's right hand, extracted from between the rollers, held up in front of her face with an expression that is still in the process of deciding how bad this is. The hand is red. 2 fingers are at angles that fingers are not supposed to be at. She's looking at them with the clinical detachment of someone whose brain is slightly ahead of the pain which has not yet caught up. Then it catches up. Mrs. Garvey moves with a speed that surprises you. She's across the laundry in 5 seconds, and the economy with which she handles the next 3 minutes gives you an unwilling respect for her, whatever else you think. She does not fuss. She takes Harriet's arm, examines the hand briefly, says something in a low voice that you can't hear, and calls for Ruth to bring the linen bandage that is kept in the tin box on the shelf by the door. Harriet does not cry out again. She makes a sound once that is mostly breath, and then she is very quiet and very white under the red of her steam-flushed face. The broken fingers. That's the clinical summary. 2 broken fingers on the right hand. She will be taken to the infirmary. She will miss laundry work for however many weeks bones require in a malnourished 15-year-old with insufficient sunlight and marginally adequate nutrition. She will come back when they say she is healed, which will mean the bones have knitted in whatever configuration they knitted in, functional or otherwise. The laundry resumes in 5 minutes. This is not callousness. Exactly. Or not only callousness. It is simply the arithmetic of a place where the work does not stop because an individual has been damaged by it. The mangle goes on turning. The copper vats go on boiling. The sheets go in and come out and go to the drying racks, and the work does not have a pause button. But you notice for the rest of the morning that every woman who works near the mangle is working with a particular quality of attention, a heightened presence, a reminder, if one were needed, that the machinery in here does not forgive approximation. You go back to the hand-washing tub. By 10 o'clock, your shoulders are burning and your back has moved from aching to a settled pain that you've learned to breathe around. A technique that doesn't eliminate it, but creates a kind of coexistence. Your hands are red to the wrist and beginning to show the familiar white puckering at the fingertips that means the skin is waterlogged and starting to soften in ways that will crack later. You pause once to stretch your fingers back as far as they'll go, feeling the tendons protest along the inside of your wrist. You have learned that if you don't do this periodically, by afternoon you lose some of the fine dexterity you need, and then you make mistakes, and mistakes here have a cost. Around you, the laundry has found its midday rhythm. The heat is at its peak, the copper vats boiling constantly, the steam filling the upper portion of the room so thickly that the ceiling is invisible. The windows above the mangle, high and narrow, let in a light that the steam immediately diffuses into a general grey brightness. No direction to it, no shadow. It could be any hour. It could be almost any weather. The laundry exists outside of those distinctions. The sound is constant and layered. The slap of wet cloth against the wooden rubboard, which the women use to increase the friction of the hand-washing. The rhythmic creak of the mangle. The hiss and pop of steam from the copper lids. Voices low and intermittent, the working conversation of women who are too tired to talk at length but not so isolated as to stop entirely. You listen to the voices sometimes. There are women here of almost every variety of misfortune. Women who are in service and lost their positions for reasons that range from illness to the kind of employer decision that cannot be argued with. Women whose husbands died and left them with children and no income, which is the most common story, recurring in its variations like different verses of the same song. Women who fell into debt. Women who left bad situations and found themselves with nowhere to go. Women who are here because they were here before, who've left the workhouse 2 or 3 or 4 times and come back each time, the city outside having failed to provide sufficient foothold. And then there is a category that is never discussed in the terms I'm about to use, but that everyone here understands instinctively: the women who are simply too poor to be anywhere else, not because of any specific catastrophe, not because of a particular death or disaster, but because the world outside costs more than the world inside, and this place is the city's last resort before the street. You sort yourself in the first category, the specific catastrophe category. This distinction matters to you more than it perhaps should, and you've noticed that, and you're not entirely sure what to make of the noticing. Bridget from the dormitory is one of the permanent residents in the philosophical sense. She's been here 3 years and does not seem to be building toward an exit. She is at the copper today, working the paddle with a methodical endurance that seems entirely sustainable, as if she has calibrated herself to exactly the speed the work requires and no faster. She is, in her way, the most competent person in the laundry. Mrs. Garvey knows this. She has given Bridget the copper specifically, the most skilled and demanding position in terms of sustaining the correct temperature and the correct stirring rhythm, because Bridget will do it precisely and without complaint and without drama. Bridget talks while she works, mostly to herself, a quiet running commentary in a voice too low to fully pass from across the room. Occasionally you catch words, references to people and places that are entirely her own geography, names of people you don't know. Sometimes you think, people who may not be here anymore. You try not to wonder too hard about Bridget's interior life. You have enough of your own to manage. The second half of the morning brings the wringing. Wringing is what happens to items that have come out of the copper, but are going to the mangle for pressing, and it is the step that bridges them. You take the hot item from the copper, using the paddle and a rubber-protected grip that still lets through enough heat to feel through your palms, and you wring it. This means twisting it until the bulk of the boiling water is out of it, and it's merely very hot and very heavy rather than boiling and very heavy. The wringing motion is a full-body movement. Your hands grip the cloth, your arms twist in opposing directions, your core engages to hold the position, and you repeat this with each item in the copper batch, which can be 30 or 40 sheets, each one weighing several pounds sopping wet. By the end of a wringing session, you can feel the motion in your forearms as a specific vibrating tiredness, distinct from the general tiredness. Your grip weakens. There's a moment every time where you're wringing the last few items of a batch and your hands are shaking slightly with the effort and the heat. You wring. You've become competent at this. You didn't know you had this in you, this ability to simply do a physically demanding thing repeatedly until you're done. But you do, and it is a strange kind of self-knowledge, discovering what you can survive. The noon bell rings and brings with it the midday meal, which is the main meal of the day. The laundry work pauses for 30 minutes. 30 minutes is the allotment. The food is brought down in large containers, today a soup that is mostly broth, with some vegetable matter floating in it, a piece of bread per person, and once a week a small portion of meat that the workhouse calls a allowance, and the inmates call various things that are less technical. You sit on the stone floor with your back against the wall and your legs stretched out in front of you. The soup bowl is hot against your palms. You drink more than you eat, tilting the bowl because there's not much to spoon, feeling the warmth move down through you. The woman sitting next to you today is called Frances. She arrived the same week you did, which means you have a rough contemporaneity. You're both approximately the same distance from whatever life you had before. Frances was a seamstress in Bermondsey. came with her mother, who is now in the infirmary with a lung complaint, and carries about her a kind of careful pride that the institution has not yet fully processed into compliance. She still sits straight-backed. She still speaks in complete sentences. She still sometimes expresses opinions. "They're sending us more hospital bags tomorrow," she says, not looking at you, looking at the soup. "I heard Garvey telling the matron. We haven't finished today's." "I know." A pause in which this information settles. "Harriet's fingers," Francis says. "That's the second this year from the mangle." You think about this. Who was the first? A woman named Cartwright. Before you came. 3 fingers on her left hand. Francis pauses. She sorted the laundry after. Couldn't do anything requiring grip. Is she still here? She died in June. The lung thing, not the hand. Francis drains the last of her soup. The mangle's been here since at least 55. They just keep fixing it. You look across at the mangle standing at the far wall, its cast-iron solidity. It has been here 13 years at minimum. 13 years of hands coming too close. 13 years of that reversed crank manoeuvre that Ruth performed this morning. 13 years of the work continuing regardless. "My mother was a laundress," Francis says suddenly. "Before she took ill. Private laundress. Worked for a family in Clapham." She runs her thumb along the rim of her empty bowl. "She said the secret was the temperature of the rinse. Too hot and the fibres set in their dirty state. Too cold and the soap doesn't rinse out." She pauses. That was the knowledge. That was what she knew. You don't say anything. Sometimes Francis just needs to talk, and the kindest thing you can do is be there while she does it. 13 years of work, and it comes to this. She puts the bowl down. A room in a cellar and someone else's sheets. The bell rings and the 30 minutes is over. You gather your bowl and stand up and go back to the work. The afternoon is harder than the morning in the particular way that afternoons always are, where the body has already spent its morning reserves and must now operate on something more essential, something more determined and less energetic. The heat in the laundry feels more oppressive after noon than before it. The steam seems thicker. The sound of the work becomes something you hear from slightly inside your own skull rather than from outside it. You move from the hand-washing tub to the drying operation. The drying room is adjacent to the main laundry, separated by a low doorway you must duck to pass through. It is a large room with wooden racks suspended from the ceiling on pulley systems so they can be raised and lowered. The warm air from the laundry circulates through, and in dry weather there is additional warmth from a coal stove in the corner. The work here is carrying the wrung or mangled items from the laundry and hanging them on the racks, which requires reaching up with items that are still heavy despite their processing, and then when dry, removing them, folding them with the precision that Mrs. Garvey requires. Because poorly folded laundry returned to a client is a poor advertisement for the establishment, and this establishment's survival depends on the contracts. You hang sheets. The motion, lift, reach, clip, lower your arms, take the next one. Your shoulders protest the reaching. Your hands protest the clipping. The room smells of damp cloth slowly drying, which is a less aggressive smell than the laundry proper, almost pleasant in comparison. There's a woman here already, a very small woman named Edith who is perhaps 70, and should not by any rights be doing laundry work at 70, but is here because the alternative is the street, and the Board of Guardians has determined that she is able-bodied enough to contribute, which is the kind of determination that is easier to make from a distance than up close. Edith hangs sheets with a concentrated slowness that somehow keeps pace with the work required. She's been doing this for 18 months. Her hands are arthritic, clearly. the knuckles enlarged and the motion of her fingers reduced to what is functional rather than what would be comfortable. And she works around this limitation with the kind of practiced accommodation that takes years to develop. She looks at you when you come through the door. Not a smile exactly, but a recognition. You've worked alongside her several times. She has what you might describe as a benign quality. Not warm exactly, but not hostile. Neutral in a way that feels like space to breathe. "Bad morning," she says. "Harriet Sims, the mangle." Edith makes a sound. "I heard." She clips a sheet to the nearest rack without looking at it. She'll heal. Girls do. You hang the first sheet. The rack takes the weight, and you release it, and reach for the next. "How long have you been doing this?" you ask. "Not the workhouse. The work." "You mean the work." "Laundry," Edith considers. 50 years, one way or another. 50 years. You're 17. 50 years ago, you were not yet imagined. Private service first, then taking in washing, then here. She shrugs. A small movement, no drama in it. The work doesn't change much. Hot water, soap, pressure, heat. Different rooms, but the same work. You hang another sheet. The drying room is quieter than the laundry. You can hear each other without raising your voices. Does it get easier? You ask, and then feel slightly foolish for asking it, because it's such an obvious question, such a newcomer question. Edith doesn't make you feel foolish. She considers it. "The body gets used to it," she says. "The body's very obliging that way, but easier is not quite the right word." Another sheet. You learn where the pain is coming from, and that helps, knowing what hurts and why. This is either comforting or not comforting, and you hold it while you hang the next sheet and the one after that, and eventually decide it is the honest version of comfort, which is a different thing than the comfortable version. By 3 in the afternoon, you have hung 47 sheets, 23 nightgowns, and a number of smaller items. Your arms feel as though someone has removed the bones and replaced them with something heavier. The cracked skin at your knuckles has opened in 2 places, small splits that sting when the damp cloth touches them, and which you ignore because the alternative is to stop working. And stopping working is not an option that presents itself. Mrs. Garvey does her afternoon round at 3:15. She walks through the laundry and the drying room with the expression of someone auditing a set of accounts. She checks the drying racks. She picks up a sheet and holds it up to examine it in the light from the high windows. She checks the tally book at the sorting table, running her finger down the columns. She stops at your entry, looks at it, does not say anything. Moves on. This is approval, in Mrs. Garvey's language. Not saying anything means the numbers are correct. Saying something would mean the numbers weren't, or something else was wrong. And the saying of things by Mrs. Garvey is almost always in the service of correction rather than encouragement. You are learning her language. The grammar of silence and single nods and the particular quality of her not looking that can mean either you're doing fine or she's considering something, and the difference is detectable in her posture. The afternoon batch from the hospital arrives at 4. A cart pulls into the courtyard above, which you can hear as a rumble through the ceiling, and then the canvas bags come down the stairs carried by 2 men from the outdoor labour team. The bags are dropped in the corner by the sorting table. 7 of them. More sorting. You go back to the sorting table. Your hands are shaking slightly now, a fine tremor that is the body's announcement that it is running lower than it would prefer. You notice the shaking and note it and continue, because the shaking doesn't prevent function, it's just information. You open the first bag. And here is the thing that you did not expect about this work when you arrived 11 weeks ago. The thing that nobody tells you in advance, not because they're hiding it, but because there's no language that quite prepares you. The thing is the intimacy of it. These sheets, these nightgowns, these small linen items, they carry the presence of people in them in a way that is entirely physical and entirely real. The warmth that a body leaves in cloth, the particular smell of a specific person's illness or anxiety or effort, the impression of fingers in a hem that was gripped tightly during a difficult night, the stain that is not anonymous and not abstract, but is the material evidence of a real person experiencing something real. You handle these things, you put your hands on them, you clean them. There is, you have decided, a kind of honesty in this, a kind of intimacy that no one on the streets above has with the people in the hospitals. You know these people through their cloth. You know their nights, or the physical evidence of their nights. You know nothing about their names or their faces or their lives, but you know something about their body's experience. And in a strange way, this feels like knowledge that matters, though you'd be hard-pressed to explain to anyone why. You sort, open, assess, sort. By 5 o'clock the sorting is done and the new batch is in the preparation soak and the day's processed laundry is in the drying room, and the laundry is beginning its evening wind down, which does not mean it stops but means it slows, the boiling reduced to simmering, the mangle standing still, the copper tenders winding down their stirring to a maintenance rhythm. Evening meal is at 6. Dinner was the main meal. Supper is bread and a small piece of cheese and sometimes cup of cocoa, which is the thing you look forward to most, not because of the flavour, which is thin and institutional, but because hot liquid in your hands at the end of this day feels like the most concentrated kindness the world has to offer. You carry your supper upstairs. You eat it in the day room, which is a large common room where the women who are not on evening duty spend their evenings. It has benches along the walls and a fireplace that is generally kept lit from October onwards, which it is, and the combination of the fire's warmth and the cocoa and the sitting down, the actual permission to sit down after 11 hours on your feet, produces a kind of physical relief that has no intellectual dimension to it. It's purely bodily. The way relief from pain is not joy, but is the absence of pain which feels like joy. Frances sits next to you. She has obtained a small piece of bread in addition to her regular portion, by some transaction you didn't observe, and she breaks it in half without ceremony and gives you part. You take it. You don't make a production of the taking. "My mother's better today," she says. "Agnes told me. They moved her out of the fever room." "That's good. They said she can come back to the laundry in 2 weeks, if she keeps improving." You can hear the complicated quality of this. The relief that her mother is better. The qualification that better means returning to the laundry. The recognition that in this place, recovery means returning to the thing from which you need to recover. 2 weeks is good, you say. 2 weeks is enough time. Frances looks at the fire. For what? To improve properly, before they put her back. She nods. Neither of you says what you're both thinking, which is that the laundry is not the kind of environment that helps a lung complaint, what with the steam and the chemical fumes and the cold that sits in the stone floors and the walls, and that the decision to send a woman with a lung complaint back to the laundry after 2 weeks is a decision made from the economics of the workhouse, rather than the medicine of the individual. But there is no point in saying this. The saying of it does not change it. You drink your cocoa. The day room has a quality in the evenings that the laundry never has, something approaching ease. Not warmth, exactly. Not in the full sense, but proximity to warmth. Women sitting together, some of them talking, some of them working on the small tasks that fill private time here, mending their own clothing, of which there is always some, because work of this kind is hard on cloth. Some of them sitting quiet, doing the thing you've learned to recognize as the interior work, the rebuilding that happens in silence after a day that has taken something. There's a woman named Clara who's been here 2 years and has somehow preserved, within herself, an ability to find things funny. Not in a performing way, just in a quiet, internal way. A private amusement at the texture of things that occasionally surfaces in a short laugh or a dry comment that makes the women around her smile without quite knowing why they're smiling. She is here this evening, sitting by the fire, talking to Bridget in a low voice, and once she says something that makes Bridget produce a sound that might be a laugh if you've never heard a laugh before and are working from first principles. You watch them and you feel something that you don't immediately have a name for, something adjacent to warmth, something about the fact that here, in this place, there are still people capable of making each other laugh. After supper there are evening duties, not heavy ones, not the work of the day, but maintenance tasks that the workhouse assigns to keep the building operational, sweeping primarily. The dormitories, the corridors, the day room itself. You take a broom and you sweep, and the sweeping has a different quality to the laundry work. It's lighter, and the end of it is visible. A clean floor where there was a dirty one, a small contained improvement. The dormitory at 8 is almost quiet. The women come up from the day room in 1s and 2s. The candles are extinguished at 8:30, matron's rule, and by 9 the room is dark except for the moonlight through the high window, which tonight is partial, the moon behind clouds, offering just enough light to navigate by. You lie down on your cot. For the first 5 minutes your body is simply confused by the horizontal. After 11 hours of vertical work, the lying down feels almost aggressively different, your spine unsure what to do with a surface that is supportive in a direction it hasn't experienced all day. There's a moment of something almost like luxury, which passes quickly as the hard mattress reasserts itself beneath you. Your hands are the last thing to quiet. They continue for a while to feel the work in them, the ghost of the motion, the wringing still present in the forearms, the rubboard still present in the palms. The skin at the knuckles stings with the precise punctual stinging of small wounds in the process of drying. Tomorrow you will find the dried blood there and work around it as you have learned to do. You think about Thomas. Sunday is 4 days away. You've been doing the arithmetic of Sunday since you arrived, always calculating the distance to the next one, the next 30 minutes in the visitor's room with a supervised table between you and your brother, the next careful assessment of how he's doing. 8 years old. He is growing up in here, which is not the sentence you would have chosen for him, not the one you were working toward, but it is the one that is true, and the workhouse has an odd way of being true at you with great consistency. The ceiling above you is white, the same institutional whitewash as everywhere else, and in the dark it is merely a darker shade of dark. You stare at it. Somewhere in the children's wing, which is on the other side of the building and 2 floors up, Thomas is asleep or trying to sleep, in a room with 29 other children, on a cot the same as yours, under a blanket the same as yours. You've decided you're going to get both of you out. This decision was made in your 3rd week here, when the initial shock of the place had settled enough for you to think past it. The decision has the quality of a fixed point, something you navigate by, rather than something you question. Getting out requires money, which requires a position, which requires a reference, which requires demonstrating the kind of reliability and skill that the workhouse can attest to, which is something they actually do occasionally for inmates who are considered worthy of it. The Board of Guardians has a mechanism for placing inmates in domestic service. You have identified this mechanism. You have been careful since the identification to be the kind of person it might apply to. You are literate, which you demonstrated by being given the tally book. You are numerically competent, which is visible in the tally book. You work hard, which is not a strategy but is true, and Mrs. Garvey has noted it in the way that she notes things, in the absence of comment. You are building towards something, here in this steam-filled room, one correctly tallied column at a time. This is not a comfortable way to feel. The building toward is not comfort, but it is orientation, and orientation is better than what some of the women here have, which is the particular exhaustion of having stopped facing any particular direction. You close your eyes. The sounds of the dormitory settle around you, the breathing of 22 other women, the distant sounds of the street outside, the city above and around this place, which continues on its own logic regardless of what happens in the basement laundries, and the dormitories, and the institutional corridors. Carts somewhere. A dog. The faint sound of a public house. Music or laughter, difficult to distinguish through walls and distance. London goes on. The largest city in the world, containing approximately 3 million people by the census of 1861, and that number has grown since. Growing always, the city eating people from elsewhere, and making them Londoners by proximity and necessity. People from every county in England, from Ireland, from Scotland, from further places than those, all of them inside the same smoke and noise and enormous grinding commerce. And in this basement, in this whitewashed room, 42 women sleeping or trying to sleep, most of them here because the city's economy has a specific shape, and some people fit inside the shape and some people don't, and the ones who don't end up in places like this. The ceiling exists above you in the dark. Tomorrow the bell will ring at 5:30. You will perform the same cold floor ritual. You will put on the same stiff shoes with the same careful knot. You will descend the same worn stairs into the same steam and alkaline air and the same accumulation of other people's dirty linen. And you will do the work. Because the work is what there is. Because the work, however it damages you, is also the thing keeping you here, in this place, on this side of the various worse alternatives. Because Thomas needs you alive and functional and getting towards something, and the work is the mechanism of that getting. This is enough, you tell yourself. This is a position from which to move. You believe this with enough conviction to make it almost true. The breathing of the women around you deepens. Sleep comes for them one by one, the room settling into its nighttime rhythm. Your hands stop shaking. The day's work fades from your arms slowly, the pain diminishing into the background noise of ordinary tiredness. You sleep. Sunday comes the way good things come in difficult places, too slowly and then all at once, the week accumulating day by day until suddenly it is there, and you're standing in the corridor outside the visitor's room at 2 p.m, with your hands clean for the first time all week, properly clean, scrubbed with extra care at the basin this morning until the grey of the laundry was gone from the creases of your knuckles, and your nails were as clean as you could make them, which is a ritual that has nothing to do with vanity, and everything to do with the fact that you're going to see your brother, and you're going to look like someone who is managing. Thomas is already there when the door opens. He's sitting at the table nearest the window with the particular quality of stillness that a child achieves when they're trying very hard to appear calm. and when he sees you come through the door, the stillness breaks apart and his face does the thing that his face does, and you have 30 minutes. You sit across from him. The table between you is the rule. The supervised visit, the matron in the corner with her knitting, the 30 minutes. All of it is the rule. You have decided to treat the rules as irrelevant to the real content of the visit, which is this, your brother's face. The fact that he is here and you are here and both of you are, in the ways that matter. All right. You look tired, he says. He's 8 years old, and this is his opening observation. I'm fine, you say. You look like you've grown. I haven't. He considers this. Maybe a little. How is Clem? Good. He got in trouble for something he didn't do, and got extra kitchen duties, and then he actually did the thing he got punished for, just to make it even. You look at your brother. That's a strange logic, you say. He said if he was already punished for it, he might as well do it. He'll either be very successful or very frequently in trouble. Thomas almost smiles. Both, probably. This is the 30 minutes. This is what you are working toward all week. This rhythm of conversation. This ordinariness of talking to your brother about Clem's peculiar ethical system, while a matron knits in the corner, and the afternoon light comes through the window at an angle that turns everything slightly golden. Are they feeding you properly, you ask? The porridge is bad, he says, but there's usually enough of it. That's honest. Supper is better. There was mutton last Thursday. How are your lessons? The children's wing runs lessons in the mornings, reading and arithmetic and some scripture, which you knew from the Workhouse descriptions but hadn't been sure would actually be consistent. Thomas confirms they are. His expression when he confirms it is the expression of someone who has discovered that they are good at something and is still in the process of deciding how to feel about that. I'm ahead of most of them, he says, slightly too carefully, as though he's not sure if this is acceptable information to offer. In the reading. That's because we practiced, you say, every evening before. I know, he looks at the table. I remember. You think about the evenings before. The two of you in the room above the chandlers with the single candle and the newspaper your father used to bring home, and then kept bringing home even when he was too ill to go out, because he understood that the newspaper was how you learned. The two of you sounding out words together, building the habit of literacy one evening at a time. The newspaper was how your mother taught you. She had it from her own mother, who had it from a time when teaching a girl to read was a small act of resistance against the general assumption that she wouldn't need to be. You're glad now, with a specific and practical gratitude that has nothing sentimental in it, that you can read. Keep at the lessons, you say. It's the most important thing they can give you in there. Thomas nods. He has the look of someone who already knows this and doesn't need to be told, but accepts the telling because it comes from you. The matron in the corner turns a page of her knitting pattern without looking up. Ellen, Thomas says, and the way he says your name, first name, which he only uses when something serious is coming, alerts you before the words do. How long are we going to be here? You don't answer immediately, not because you don't have an answer, but because the answer requires care. Not forever, you say. I'm working on it. What does that mean? It means I'm being careful, building towards something. It takes time, but it's happening. He looks at you with the expression of someone who is 8 years old and understands more than 8 years old is supposed to understand. You have a plan. I have a direction, you say. Plans imply more certainty than I have right now. But a direction. Yes. He absorbs this. Okay, he says. This is the thing about Thomas. He trusts you in a way that is not blind, is not the simple trust of a child who doesn't know better. but is the trust of someone who has assessed the available evidence and made a determination. This trust is one of the most important things in your life and also one of the most demanding, because it requires you to be worth trusting every day, in every decision, in every careful column of the tally book, in every morning when the bell rings and you put your feet on the cold floor and get up anyway. Good, you say. Okay. The 30 minutes ends. You stand up at the matron's announcement with the practiced, unceremonious quality that you have developed to get through the end of these visits without making Thomas see how hard the ending is. You give him the look that means I'll be here next Sunday. He gives you the nod that means I know. And then you are back in the corridor and the door is closed and you're walking back toward the dormitory stairs with your clean hands and the week beginning again, its long count toward the next Sunday. The laundry on Monday has a particular quality that the rest of the week lacks, because it is the day the finished laundry is returned to its clients, and the morning begins with the counting and packing of the week's completed work before the new work arrives. This is Mrs. Garvey's most precise operation. The laundry that goes out must be perfect, or as close to perfect as 42 women working in steam and chemical heat can produce. It must be counted, checked, folded to the standard, wrapped in brown paper and tied, and the numbers must agree with the tally book, your tally book. This means Monday mornings you're at Mrs. Garvey's right hand, which is a position of considerable practical discomfort. She checks each item against your recorded numbers with a thoroughness that suggests she has found discrepancies before and intends to find any current ones. When the count matches, she marks it with a single line in her own ledger. When the count does not match, she looks at you. The count always matches. You have made certain of this. You've been meticulous with the tally book in the way that a person is meticulous with something when they understand its importance in a system larger than the immediate task. Today, the count matches for the hospital delivery: 47 sheets, 32 nightgowns, 16 towels. The private client parcel, 12 items for a household in Kennington. The workhouse's own domestic linen, which goes to the master's quarters and the infirmary and the officers' rooms. Mrs. Garvey marks each section. Her pen moves with the same economy as everything else about her. The Kennington parcel, she says. Who folded the tablecloths? I did. She picks up the top tablecloth from the wrapped parcel, unfolds it part way, examines the fold lines. Her face gives nothing away. The cross-fold is slightly off on the left corner, she says. You look at it. She's right. A fraction. Perhaps the width of 2 fingers, but she is right. Redo it. She moves on. You redo the tablecloth fold precisely this time, checking the corners with both hands before you set it back. The difference between the first version and the corrected version is measurable in millimeters. The difference, you are learning, between acceptable and precise is always measurable in millimeters, in the fine adjustments that separate work that is done from work that is done correctly. This is a piece of knowledge that will outlast this room. You refold the tablecloth. You rewrap the parcel. The count stands. Tuesday brings the new hospital batch, larger than last week's, and with it a particular item that stops you at the sorting table. It is a child's nightgown. Small, smaller than anything in the usual hospital delivery, which means a very small child, and there is blood on it, which is not unusual for hospital linen, but this is the particular colour and placement of blood that your body recognises before your mind does. A bright, rust red, and your hands slow for a moment over the sorting table while you look at it, And then, with the deliberate effort you have been developing for 11 weeks, you put it in the correct pile and move on to the next item. But the nightgown stays with you for the rest of the morning. There is a child somewhere who wore that. There is a family somewhere who is in the state that produces a nightgown like that. There is a doctor who saw that child, or didn't see that child in time, and the nightgown has come here to be made clean, to have the evidence removed, and tomorrow it will go back to the hospital and be put on a shelf for the next small body that needs it. This is the work. This is what the work is, underneath the institutional language about laundry contracts and Board of Guardians efficiency reports and the self-sufficiency of the workhouse system. Underneath all of that, it is this. Hands taking up the evidence of other people's suffering and making it clean again so the suffering can continue. You sort. Frances notices your expression. She's at the preparation tubs today, measuring washing soda into the water, and she glances over at you with the quiet attention she sometimes deploys. You shake your head slightly. Nothing. Keep going. She nods and turns back to the preparation tubs. By the 3rd week of November, the cold has settled into the laundry in a permanent way. The stone walls do not retain heat, and the high windows let in a draught that catches at the back of your neck if you're working near the far wall, a persistent chill that the copper's steam does not reach. The women who work the copper and the adjacent hand-washing tubs are warm, sometimes uncomfortably warm, faces red, forearms scalded to brightness. The women who work the sorting table, the drying room, the preparation area at the laundry's periphery are cold. You learn to position yourself near the copper when there's a legitimate reason to be there. You learn that warmth in this building is a resource with the geography. It is in this 3rd week of November that the thing with the copper happens. You've been moved from the sorting table to the copper assistants because Mary Doyle is in the infirmary for 2 days with a foot infection, the kind that spreads in conditions like these with the efficiency of something that has found its ideal environment. With Mary gone, Mrs. Garvey redistributes. You get the copper. The copper assistance is not the same as the copper tending, which is Mary's role. The skilled management of temperature and stirring. The assistance is the loading and unloading, which requires lifting wet, heavy items from the preparation soak and submerging them in the boiling copper, and then at the end of the cycle, lifting them out again. This is done with the long wooden paddles and with what the women here call the copper hook, a long iron tool with a hooked end for gathering items from the bottom of the vat where they sink during boiling. You're loading the 2nd batch of the morning. The copper is at full boil, which means the water surface is in constant agitation, the steam rising in thick columns, and the visibility directly above the vat is near zero. You are using the paddle to push a sheet down into the boiling water, which requires leaning over the vat with your face at the level of the rising steam, which is the part of this job that requires the most immediate physical discipline. The steam at this proximity is the temperature of burning. You keep your face turned to one side and work with your arms extended, pushing the sheet down with the flat of the paddle. What happens next is small in its cause and large in its effect, which is generally how the worst things happen. Your foot slips on the stone floor, which is wet always, perpetually, from the constant moving of water around the laundry. The slip is maybe 3 inches. Your weight shifts. Your arm comes forward 4 inches, which brings your left forearm over the lip of the copper vat, over the boiling water, into the column of steam rising directly from it. The steam hits the inside of your forearm. The pain is immediate and total, the kind of pain that exists on a different level than the gradual aching pains you've become accustomed to, the kind that produces involuntarily a sound. You pull your arm back. You do not drop the paddle. You straighten up and step back from the copper and look at your forearm. The skin there is red, bright, specific red, a band of it about 4 inches wide across the inside of your forearm, from the wrist almost to the elbow. Even as you're looking at it, you can see it darkening. The pain has the quality of the burn continuing, as if the heat is still there in the skin, though your arm is in the air far from the copper. Ruth is beside you in seconds, which tells you the sound you made was audible above the noise of the laundry. Let me see. She takes your arm, not gently but carefully, the kind of care that is about efficiency rather than tenderness. She looks at it. Her expression is the expression of someone comparing what they see against a scale of severity they carry internally. Stay still. She gets the cold water pail that is kept by the copper specifically for this eventuality, because this eventuality has occurred before, more than once, and she pours the water directly over your forearm in a steady stream, and the relief of the cold water on the burn is the most immediate, complete relief you have felt since you got here. A drowning of the pain that is the most literal version of that phrase. Keep it under, Ruth says. You hold your arm over the pail, your forearm in the cold water, feeling the pain subside from a scream to a shout to a loud, persistent complaint. The skin is very red. It will blister, Ruth tells you, looking at it again after 2 minutes. The blisters will be uncomfortable. She has seen worse from the copper. Much worse. As long as the blisters don't break and get infected, you'll be fine in 10 days. Mrs. Garvey comes over. She looks at the arm. She looks at Ruth. She looks at the copper. Can you continue? She asks you. The question is not cruel. It is exactly the question it appears to be. A logistical assessment. Can you continue? The answer will determine whether she needs to redistribute the laundry assignments again. Your arm is in a pail of cold water. The skin is blistering as you watch it. Not the copper, Ruth says before you can speak. She can do the drying room. A pause in which Mrs. Garvey performs her own assessment. Drying room, she says. Marsh, take yourself to the infirmary nurse first. Get it dressed. Then back here. She moves away. You take your arm out of the pail. The air hits the wet skin and the pain shifts register again. Becomes the particular singing pain of a burn cooling. The band of red on your forearm is bright and precise, as if someone drew a line there. Ruth walks with you to the infirmary. The infirmary is on the ground floor, 3 rooms with iron beds, currently occupied by Mary Doyle with her foot, 2 elderly men from the men's ward with various complaints, and Harriet Sims with her mangle hand, which is in a splint and is, the nurse tells you when you come in, healing as well as can be expected. Harriet is sitting up in the bed nearest the door, looking considerably more alert than she did at the moment of the incident. And she looks at your arm with the expression of a fellow alumna of laundry machinery. Copper, she says. Steam. She nods. The solidarity of specific damage. The nurse is a small, efficient woman named Miss Webb, who has been in the Workhouse infirmary for 4 years and treats everything with a combination of carbolic solution and the kind of calm that comes from having seen a great deal. She looks at your forearm, cleans it, applies a dressing with a speed that speaks of repetition, and secures it with bandaging. Keep it dry for 3 days, she says, which will not be possible in the laundry, so keep it as dry as circumstances allow, which I know is not the same thing. The drying room, you say. That's better than the copper. She looks at you. It'll hurt for several days. If the blisters break before they should, come back. You go back to the laundry with your dressed arm and you work in the drying room for the rest of the day, hanging sheets one-handed or mostly one-handed. with your left arm held slightly away from the motion, and the work is slower, but it proceeds, and by the end of the day the arm is a constant specific complaint that you have incorporated into your working rhythm, the way you've incorporated everything else. The body's very obliging, Edith said. It learns to work around what hurts. In the drawing room that afternoon you and Edith work together in the quiet, and she looks at your dressed arm and says nothing for a long time and then says, "The copper did that to a woman named Patterson 12 years ago, whole arm in the water. She lived, but she never had full use of the hand." You look at the dressing on your forearm. "I was lucky, you say?" "Yes," Edith says. She hangs a sheet with the careful deliberation of someone whose hands allow a limited range of motion and who has learned to work within that range. In here, lucky means it could have been worse. That's a different definition than outside, but it's the one you have. You hang the next sheet with your right arm. The dressing is changed at the end of the week by Miss Webb, who examines the blisters with professional detachment and pronounces them healing correctly. The skin underneath will scar slightly, she tells you, a white-pink band where the burn was deepest. You look at the scar forming on your arm and think about what it will look like in a year, in 5 years, in 20, when the context that produced it will be some distance away, and the mark will remain as evidence of a particular Tuesday in November 1868. Your body is accumulating a history. It is recording this place on your skin, and in your joints, and in the calluses on your palms. You think about what Francis said. 13 years of work, and it comes to this. You think, no, not for you, not forever. December arrives, and with it an event of considerable institutional significance, the Board of Guardians inspection. The Board of Guardians is the governing body of the Workhouse, a collection of local men, ratepayers and property owners, and occasional philanthropic figures, who are responsible for the oversight of the institution and who visit quarterly to assess its functioning. Their visit is announced 2 weeks in advance, which is 2 weeks during which the workhouse transforms itself with the particular energy of an institution preparing to be observed. The transformation is comprehensive. Floors that are swept daily are scrubbed. Walls that are whitewashed again. The dormitories receive fresh straw in the mattresses, which happens twice yearly normally, and which has been brought forward for the inspection. The food improves noticeably in the week before. More vegetables, larger portions, something approaching variety. You notice this. Everyone notices this. Nobody says it directly, because saying it directly would be impolitic. But the collective understanding in the day room during the pre-inspection week is complete and unspoken. In the laundry, the preparation for inspection means something specific. It means the copper vats are scoured to a state of reflectiveness. It means the wooden paddles are inspected for splinters and replaced where necessary. It means the sorting table is scrubbed, and the tally books are brought up to perfect order, and the drying racks are oiled so they operate smoothly. Mrs. Garvey is, during this period, at her most exacting, which is to say she is at a level of exactingness that makes her usual standard appear relaxed in comparison. She walks through the laundry 3 times a day making assessments. She requires specific items to be redone. She speaks to each woman separately about their particular role and what its performance during the inspection must look like. She speaks to you about the tally book. Your columns are adequate, she says, which you have learned to translate as good. For the inspection, I want them better than adequate. I want them clear enough that a guardian who has never seen a laundry tally can read them without asking questions. I'll redo the headings and the running totals on the right. The guardian who chairs the committee is an accountant. Yes, Mrs. Garvey. She looks at you for a moment with the expression that sometimes precedes something other than instruction. Not warmth, but something adjacent. You have a head for figures, she says. That's unusual here. You don't know what to say to this, so you say nothing. Don't waste it, she says, and moves away. You stand with this for a moment. Don't waste it. In a workhouse laundry, said by the woman who runs the workhouse laundry, this is the most pragmatic thing approaching encouragement you have received since you arrived. It is also, you realise, a kind of acknowledgement that there is something in you that does not entirely belong to this place. That the tally book and the careful columns and the literacy that Mrs. Garvey has noticed and used are not the sum total of what you are, but a part of it that should be directed somewhere with more scope. She knows this, and she has said it to you, and she's walked away and gone back to overseeing the copper scour, and you stand at the sorting table with the tally book in your hands, and you feel something shift, minutely, in the way a stone shifts when the ground under it moves. The day of the inspection, you're positioned at the sorting table when the Board of Guardians processes through the laundry at 11:30 in the morning. There are 5 of them, men of middle age and upward, dressed in the heavy dark coats of their class and period, carrying the air of people who move through institutions with authority and assess without being assessed. The workhouse master walks with them, Mr. Holt, a lean man with side whiskers who smells of tobacco and carries himself with the strained dignity of someone managing something that frequently defies dignified management. They enter the laundry, and the temperature of the room does not change, but the quality of the attention in it does. Every woman is working at a slightly higher degree of precision than normal. The copper tenders stir with an added deliberateness. The mangle operator feeds the cloth with particular care. Even Bridget's copper paddle circles have an added ceremonial quality. You write in the tally book. The guardians walk through the room in a loose group, the master explaining, gesturing, narrating the operation. 2 of the guardians look at the copper with the interest of men who understand industrial processes. One looks at the women with an expression you cannot quite read, something between sympathy and assessment, the expression of a man who is aware that this is a difficult life and is in the process of deciding what responsibility he has toward that fact. One looks at the tally book when he passes your table. He stops. He is the accountant, you realise, the one Mrs. Garvey mentioned. A compact grey-haired man with spectacles and the particular quality of stillness that indicates someone who is actually looking at what's in front of them rather than performing the act of looking. He examines your tally book, not cursorily. He turns the pages, reads the columns, follows the running totals on the right side. Yours? He asks. His voice is neutral, informational. Yes, sir. How long have you been keeping it? Since my 2nd week. 9 weeks. He turns back to the beginning of the current month, reads the entries. The categorization system. Did you devise it or was it given to you? You consider. Mrs. Garvey specified the categories. I added the sub-columns for the hospital items separately from the private clients. For the billing. He looks at you over his spectacles. Why? Because the hospital contracts are invoiced differently. Keeping them separate in the tally makes the end-of-month billing easier to reconcile. A pause. Yes, he says, it does. He closes the book and sets it back on the table. What's your name? Ellen Marsh, sir. He nods, writes nothing, moves on to rejoin the group. You watch him go. You do not know what this means, if it means anything, if it is simply the brief curiosity of a guardian who noticed something and satisfied his curiosity and moved on. The guardian's inspection produces no immediate changes to anything. They move through the laundry and out of it and proceed to other parts of the workhouse, and the day continues, the copper boiling, the mangle turning, the steam thickening the air. But something has happened, you think. Something small and potentially significant, the way small things sometimes are. Mrs. Garvey says nothing to you after the inspection, but 2 days later she tells you that your laundry assignment is being supplemented. In addition to the sorting and tally book, you will spend 1 morning per week in the workhouse office, assisting with correspondence entries, the same quality that makes you useful at the tally book, apparently, makes you useful for the legible transcription of the letters that the workhouse master dictates, and that have previously been the responsibility of a Mr. Tibbets, a clerk who is overworked and whose handwriting, according to reliable report, is a challenge to anyone attempting to read it. This is not a promotion technically. There is no promotion structure in the workhouse. It is a reassignment of labour toward its most efficient application, which is the workhouse's framework for everything. But it means 1 morning per week you are not in the laundry. You are sitting at a desk in an office with a pen in your hand writing. The office is on the ground floor facing the street. There is a window. Through the window, on your first morning there, you look out at the street and you watch London go past. And the watching of it is strange after 11 weeks, during which the city has existed only as sound through stone walls and brief glimpses during the Sunday yard time. It is a grey December day with the particular quality of London winter light that turns everything slightly silver at the edges. There are people on the pavement, a woman with a basket moving quickly, 2 men in working clothes having a conversation, a boy of about Thomas's age running, for no visible reason, in the pure physical joy of running that children demonstrate before they learn not to. A cart goes past. A dog follows it. The ordinary traffic of a London street on a Tuesday morning in December 1868, and you watch it through the office window with the sensation of someone watching something through glass that cannot be broken. The way exhibits are viewed in museums, with the awareness that you are here, and the thing is there, and the glass between you is not visible, but is entirely present. Mr. Tibbets is grateful for your presence in a way that is mildly comic. He is a small, anxious man who has clearly been drowning in his workload for some time, and your arrival represents a rescue that he accepts with a relief slightly too large for the occasion. He shows you the correspondence files, the formatting conventions, the lists of clients and suppliers, and the various officials and institutions with which the workhouse corresponds. He explains the invoicing system, which you understand more quickly than he expected, and which connects directly to the tally book categories you've been maintaining in the laundry. The hospital invoices, you say. I've been tracking those separately in the laundry tally. The sub-columns. He looks at you. Mrs. Garvey's system. My sub-columns for the billing reconciliation. He finds the relevant file. He looks at the invoices. He looks at your tally book, which he has retrieved from the laundry. This, he says, pointing to your sub-column totals, matches what should be on this invoice. He picks up the invoice. What is on this invoice is wrong. A pause. By how much, you ask? 3 shillings and 4p. He looks at the invoice and at your tally book with the expression of a man realizing he has been doing more work than necessary in the wrong direction. The hospital has been underpaying us by 3 shillings and 4p per month for the entire time. 9 months? 7 months? Since April? There's a silence in which the arithmetic resolves itself. £1 and 3 shillings, you say. Mr. Tibbets sets down the invoice. I need to check all of them. I can help, you say. You spend the next 2 hours at the desk in the office going through 7 months of hospital invoices against the tally book records, and the window is there the entire time, and London goes past outside it, and you are sitting at a desk with a pen doing the work that your brain does naturally and well, and your arm is healing under its dressing, and Thomas is in his lessons, and somewhere out there the city continues its enormous indifferent business. The discrepancy turns out to be larger than 3 and 4p per month. The total, when you've reconciled all 7 months, is £1 14s and 6p. Not a catastrophic amount in the context of the workhouse budget, but not nothing. Mr. Tibbets writes to the hospital's administrator. The administrator sends back a correction and a bank draft within the week, with a covering letter that refers to the discrepancy as a bookkeeping oversight and expresses confidence that it will not recur. Mr. Tibbets shows you the letter. He shows you the bank draft. He does not say anything specific, but he looks at you with a quality of regard that has been recalibrated by this episode. Mrs. Garvey finds out somehow, as Mrs. Garvey finds out most things that occur within the walls of this institution. On the Wednesday of the following week, she stops next to you at the sorting table. Tibbets tells me you found a billing error, she says. Yes, Mrs. Garvey. She says nothing for a moment. She's looking at the sorted piles with the assessment that is her default expression. The guardian who looked at your tally book, she says. His name is Mr. Carrow. He chairs the finance committee. You file this information without visibly reacting. He asked the master about you, she says, after the inspection. She picks up the tally book, checks the morning's entries, sets it down. You should know that, she says. She walks away. You stand at the sorting table with this information for the rest of the morning, holding it carefully, not allowing yourself to build too much on it, because building too much on the uncertain foundations of other people's possible intentions is a reliable route to a kind of disappointment that you cannot currently afford. But you hold it. December deepens. The cold sets into the building with a seriousness that the autumn cold lacked, the kind that is not an inconvenience but an environment. The dormitory at night is cold enough that you sleep in your socks, which you have learned to do early in November, and which several of the newer women have not yet discovered. And the difference between socked feet and unsocked feet on a cold night is the difference between sleeping and not sleeping. The laundry is paradoxically better in deep winter than in autumn, because the heat from the coppers is a genuine warmth that the stone walls cannot entirely defeat, and the contrast between stepping from the cold corridor into the laundry is almost pleasant for a moment, before the work of the day claims your attention. Several of the women have noted this, in the dark humour of the long-term inmate, that the worst place in the workhouse is the warmest place in winter, which is either ironic or perfectly logical depending on how you look at it. You are warming your hands over the copper one morning, in the brief interval between loading batches when Frances appears beside you. Her face has the expression she gets when she has something to say that she is not sure whether to say. My mother, she says. She's come back from the infirmary to the laundry, as was planned, 2 weeks after she was moved out of the fever room. She has been here 9 days. She's working the preparation tubs, which is lighter work than the copper, and her cough has not worsened in the damp heat, which is the best that can be said. How is she? You ask. She was talking to one of the guardian's wives, Frances says, at the Sunday service, the woman who does the charity visits. She pauses. She asked my mother if she could sew. You look at Frances. She can, Frances says. She was a seamstress before the laundry. What did the woman say? She said she would make inquiries. Francis looks at the copper, about a position for a woman who could sew and had a daughter who could read and keep accounts. The laundry noise continues around you. The steam, the paddles, the mangle at the far wall resuming its work after Harriet's return, 2 weeks in and managing with the splintered hand in a way that speaks to the resilience of 15, or to the absence of alternatives, or both. You think about what Francis is telling you. A charitable visitor, a woman who does the Sunday visits and speaks to inmates and makes inquiries. An inquiry about a woman who can sew and a daughter who can read and keep accounts. When, you say? She didn't say. She said she would make inquiries. Francis glances at you. I wanted you to know. You nod. Your face is doing the thing you've trained it to do, which is to not show what's happening inside it, when what's happening inside it is something this large. Thank you, you say. Don't thank me yet, Francis says. She said she would make inquiries. That could mean anything. I know. It could mean anything. It could mean nothing. It could mean a polite conversation that the charitable visitor will have forgotten by next Sunday. It could mean the thing it sounds like it might mean, which is the beginning of a way out of here. You warm your hands over the copper and do not allow yourself to decide which one it is. But you are very careful for the rest of that day about how you work. You are careful at the sorting table, precise with the tally book, deliberate with the folding, thorough with everything you touch. Not because you weren't careful before, you were. But there is a quality of attention you bring to the work for the remainder of that day that is slightly more than your usual careful, that has the additional charge of someone who has heard something that may or may not be important, and is in the process of conducting themselves as though it is. December passes into Christmas, which in the workhouse is marked by a church service and a dinner with a small meat allowance, and, for the children's wing, a quantity of oranges donated by a local merchant, which Thomas tells you about on the Sunday visit, with an enthusiasm that costs him nothing in dignity, because he's 8 years old and the workhouse has not yet taught him to be unmoved by oranges. 2 each, he says. Clemate is so fast he was sick. That's not a surprise, you say. He did it on purpose, Thomas says, with the judicious tone of someone who has considered the facts and rendered a verdict, to see what would happen. What happened was he was sick. He already knew that would happen, Thomas considers. He wanted to know how sick. You look at your brother's face, which is rounder than it was in November, which is the evidence of adequate if not excellent nutrition, and you think about the two of you in the room above the chandlers eating bread and cold potatoes because the money had run out, and you think about the oranges. 2 each is generous, you say. I kept mine, he says. I ate them slowly. You nod. This tells you something about Thomas that you already knew, that he has the ability rare in children and not that common in adults either, to delay the consumption of good things, to make them last, to choose the duration of pleasure over the intensity of it. He is going to be all right. You carry this certainty back to the laundry with you on Sunday evening, down the stairs into the steam and the alkaline air, and it sits with you through the week like something warm. January arrives. January in the laundry means the cold has won definitively, and the warmth from the coppers is no longer adequate to the temperature differential between inside and outside. So the laundry is warm in the immediate vicinity of the vats and cold everywhere else, and the women move between these zones with the practical navigation of people managing limited resources. Your burn is healed to the white-pink scar that Miss Webb predicted, a line of slightly different texture across the inside of your forearm that you touch sometimes, absently, feeling the difference in the skin. It is on a Tuesday morning in January, 23 weeks after your arrival, that Mr. Holt, the workhouse master, comes to the laundry. He does not ordinarily come to the laundry. This is Mrs. Garvey's domain, and the master's domain is the administrative body of the institution, and the two operate in separate spheres, with the mutual understanding of people who have a clear division of territory. His presence in the laundry doorway is therefore immediately and collectively noted. Mrs. Garvey meets him at the door. They speak in low voices. Their exchange takes approximately 2 minutes. She has an expression during it that you cannot read from across the room, her profile giving away nothing, as is her way. Then she turns and looks across the laundry, and her eyes find you at the sorting table. "Marsh," she says. You put down the item in your hands. You walk across the laundry to the door. You're aware of the attention of the room behind you, 40-odd women performing the specific kind of peripheral awareness that people in institutions develop for events that deviate from the routine. Mr. Holt looks at you. "Miss Marsh," he says, which is the first time anyone in the workhouse has called you Miss anything, and the formality of it is startling. There is someone who wishes to speak with you. You follow him out of the laundry and up the stairs. The office, when you reach it, contains 2 people you've not seen before. Mr. Tibbets is at his desk with the expression of a man who's been told to be present, and is being present as unobtrusively as possible. The other 2 are a woman and a man, both of perhaps 50, sitting in the 2 chairs that have been placed across from the master's desk. The woman is dressed in the dark, well-made clothes of a comfortable household, not wealthy in the elaborate sense, but solidly, practically comfortable. She has a quality about her of someone who is accustomed to making decisions and having them attended to. The man beside her is less immediately present, retiring in his manner, but has the hands of someone who works with detail, fine-boned, ink-stained at the fingernails. "Miss Marsh," says Mr. Holt. He gestures at the chairs. "You sit." "This is Mrs. Holbrook," he says, "and her husband, Mr. Holbrook. They operate a linen drapery business in Kennington." Kennington. Your mind locates Kennington, the private client, the tablecloth you refolded, the crossfold a fraction off on the left corner. "Mrs. Holbrook," Mr. Holt says, "has been in correspondence with Mr. Carrow of the Board of Guardians." "Mr. Carrow told us about the billing reconciliation," Mrs. Holbrook says. Her voice is direct, not unkind. She looks at you with the attention of someone actually assessing rather than performing assessment. "He also told us about your work with the tally books, the sub-categorization. Mrs. Garvey's categories, you say, my sub-columns." "He was specific about the distinction," Mrs. Holbrook says, and the slight upward inflection might be amusement. "He has a head for figures himself. He recognized someone else who had." Mr. Holbrook speaks for the first time. "We run a small operation," he says. 3 staff. We have been without a bookkeeper for 4 months since our previous one married and removed to Leeds." He says this with the resigned quality of an employer who has accepted that these things happen. "We need someone literate, numerate, honest, and capable of keeping the ledgers in order." You look at him. You look at Mrs. Holbrook. "We're also told," Mrs. Holbrook says, "that you have a younger brother in the children's wing." "He's 8, you say. His name is Thomas." A pause. "We have a position," Mrs. Holbrook says, "a live-in position, for a bookkeeper and general assistant. We have a room above the shop which is modest but private." She looks at you steadily. "The workhouse has arrangements with certain employers for apprentices of good character who have demonstrated useful skills." The children's wing, you say. Thomas. There is a church school 2 streets from our premises, Mrs. Holbrook says. Mr. Holbrook sits on the board. They take children of working households without payment in the mornings. The office is very quiet. Mr. Tibbets is looking carefully at his own hands. We cannot guarantee permanence, Mr. Holbrook says. No employer can. But we are a stable concern. 11 years in the same premises. We pay 12 shillings per week plus board and room. 12 shillings. More than twice what any position you could reasonably have expected before the workhouse. The result of 23 weeks of careful tally books and correct fold lines and sub-columns that match the billing. Miss Marsh, Mrs. Holbrook says, not unkindly, I understand this is a great deal of information. You are permitted to ask questions. You have questions. You have approximately 40 questions, organised by priority, the most important of which is the one you ask. When, you say. Mrs. Holbrook looks at Mr. Holt. A silent exchange of something institutional and logistical. 2 weeks, Mr. Holt says. There is a process. Forms to complete. The board must formally discharge you. 2 weeks. You sit with this number. You turn it over. You put it next to the 23 weeks that have preceded it. And you do the arithmetic of duration, the way you've been doing the arithmetic of duration since you arrived. And 2 weeks is 14 days, which is the smallest number you've counted to in months. Yes, you say. It is not a complicated answer. It does not contain all the things it contains. The 11 weeks of cold floors and sorting tables, and hospital nightgowns and burned forearms, and Francis's careful pride, and Edith's arthritis, and Bridget's murmuring, and Harriet's mangle hand, and the 30-minute Sundays, and the tally book, and the sub-columns, and Thomas's 2 oranges. It does not contain any of that. It is just the word. Yes, you say again, because once did not feel like enough. The 2 weeks do not pass quickly. This is the thing about anticipated good events. They have the opposite quality of dreaded ones. Dreaded things arrive faster than you want them to, and anticipated things slower. And the 14 days between the conversation in Mr. Holt's office and your discharge from the Lambeth workhouse pass with the particular slow deliberateness of time that knows you are watching it. You count them. You were not going to count them. You made a decision not to count them, because counting makes things slower, and you know this. And then on the first evening after the conversation, you find yourself calculating, and the calculation is already made before you can stop it. 14 days. And after that there is no point in the decision not to count. What you do instead is work. You work with a quality of attention that has changed in a way you notice, and the women around you notice, and Mrs. Garvey notices. Though none of you say anything about what has changed or why, the work has not changed. The sorting table is the sorting table. The tally book is the tally book. The hospital linen arrives in its canvas bags with the same frequency and the same smell and the same weight. The copper boils at the same temperature. The mangle turns at the same speed. But you are doing it differently now. Not better exactly. You are already doing it as well as you could do it. That has been true since approximately the 4th week. But with a different quality of presence. You're doing it with the full attention of someone who knows how many times they have left to do it, who is counting down not toward escape but toward completion, the way you finish a book differently in the last 50 pages than in the middle 100, with more attention to each sentence, knowing that each one is one fewer. This is the thing you did not expect, that the leaving would make the staying feel more present rather than less. On the Thursday of the first week, you go back to the drawing room in the afternoon and find Edith at the racks with her arthritic hands and her precise, careful movements, and you work alongside her in the quiet, and at some point you say, without planning to say it, "I'm leaving in a week." She clips a sheet to the rack with both hands, her knuckles bent around the clip. She does not look at you. "I know," she says. "How do you know?" "The way you've been working." She pauses to reach for the next sheet, the motion slow and deliberate and entirely certain. People work like that when they know something is ending, like they're memorizing it. You think about whether this is true. You think it is true. "Where are you going?" she asks. "A linen drapery in Kennington, bookkeeping." "Your brother?" "He'll come with me. There's a school." Edith hangs the sheet, moves to the next one. Her movements have the quality you have realized over many months of water moving, not fast, not slow, simply continuous, finding the most efficient path through the available space. "Good," she says. It is the most information Edith has exchanged with you in a single conversation. You file it away with the other things you are memorizing. Francis takes the news with the expression of someone who is entirely glad for you, and is managing the gladness with the discipline required when you yourself are not leaving. She sits with you at supper the evening you tell her, and she is quiet for a longer time than usual, and then she says, "Your sub-columns, who's going to do them after you go?" "I've written out the method," you say, "for whoever takes the tally book." "Garvey will find someone." "She will." Francis looks at her bread. "My mother's cough is worse again." You wait. "It doesn't matter," she says. I'm not saying it as a comparison. I'm glad for you. She stops. "I just need a moment." "Take the moment," you say. She does. She takes it quietly, sitting with her supper, and you sit with yours, and the evening moves around you both in the day room, the fire, the other women, the familiar sounds of this place that has been your entire world for 23 weeks. "When my mother is better," Francis says eventually. "Yes, there will be something." "There will be," you say. You believe this. You believe it partly because it is true that the city has things in it for people who can do things, and Francis's mother can sew, and Francis herself can read and is precise, and careful and capable, and those qualities have value outside of this room. You believe it partly because you need to believe it for her sake, and the two reasons are not entirely separate. "She taught me the temperature of the rinse," Francis says. "Too hot and the fibres set. Too cold and the soap doesn't come out." "That's knowledge," you say. "I know," she says. "I know it is." On the Sunday of the first week you see Thomas for the scheduled 30 minutes and you tell him. You keep your voice level and your expression matter of fact, the way you've learned to deliver important information in this place, which is without the ceremony that would make it feel large and therefore potentially fragile. "We're leaving," you say. He looks at you. "In a week. There's a position in Kennington, a linen drapery, bookkeeping." You pause. "There's a school near the shop, 2 streets away." Thomas does not say anything for a long moment. He sits across the table from you with the particular stillness he achieves when he is absorbing something significant. The same stillness that was on his face when you first came through the door months ago, and you wait for him to process it at whatever speed he needs to process it. "A real school," he says, not a question. "A church school, mornings, with other children." "Yes." He looks at the table, he looks at his hands. He is 8 years old, and he's been in this place for 23 weeks, which is almost a quarter of his life, and the room he lives in has 30 other children in it, and his best friend is a boy named Clem, who once made himself sick deliberately to answer a specific empirical question, and there is a school 2 streets from a linen drapery in Kennington. When does Clem leave? He asks. I don't know, you say. When there's a position for him, or for whoever his family, you stop. You don't know Clem's situation precisely. When there's something for him, Thomas nods. You should write to him, you say. After, they'll forward letters. Can I write letters? I'll teach you how, properly. We'll practice. He nods again. The nod has something in it that you recognise as the processing of loss, alongside the processing of change, the understanding that leaving good things behind is part of getting to better things, a piece of knowledge that most people are still learning in their 40s. A week, he says, 6 days now. He looks at you with his father's eyes. Okay, he says. The second week has a different quality from the first. The first week was still routine, punctuated by the knowledge of what was coming. The second week is transition. Everything slightly double exposed, the laundry and the elsewhere simultaneously present. You do your work and you're also already not there. Mrs. Garvey presents you with a tally book on the Thursday of the second week. She has made a copy of the method notes you wrote, the sub-column instructions, and this copy will go to whoever takes over the book. She stands across the sorting table from you, and she looks at you directly, which she does rarely, and she says, You have done good work here, Marsh. You say, Thank you, Mrs. Garvey. She says, Don't confuse it with the place. The work was yours, not the place. You think about this for a long time afterward. The work was yours, not the place. The distinction she's drawing between the quality of what you did and the context in which you did it, the refusal to let the setting contaminate the accomplishment. She's a woman of very few generous gestures. This is one of them. You receive it accordingly. Mary Doyle, back at her copper since early December, nods at you across the room on your last Friday. She is stirring with a long paddle, her face red with the familiar copper heat, and she catches your eye and nods once, the economical nod that has been the register of their entire acquaintance, and it contains in it something complete that you don't have language for, but that you feel in your chest like warmth. Bridget from the dormitory is asleep when you leave. You leave early, 6 o'clock in the morning, because the discharge time is set by Mr. Holt's administrative schedule rather than by any consideration of sentiment, and Bridget is a late riser, relatively speaking, still in her cot with her enormous slow-breathing solidity when you take your bundle of belongings, which is not large, and walk down the dormitory for the last time. You stop at the end of her cot. You look at her. She's entirely asleep, her face in repose, the murmuring that accompanies her sleep quiet at this particular moment. You don't wake her. There's nothing you could say that would improve the moment. You turn and walk out. The discharge process takes 40 minutes and consists primarily of paperwork, which Mr. Tibbets handles with the efficiency of someone who's been relieved of a billing discrepancy and a handwriting deficit by the person he is now processing out of the institution. He looks at you with the restrained quality of a man who would like to express something, but is confined by both his temperament and his role. The method notes, he says, for the tally book sub-columns. I've made a third copy for the permanent records. That's good, you say. It was an excellent system, he says, which is as close as Mr. Tibbets gets to a speech. Thomas is brought from the children's wing by a young woman from the domestic staff, a girl you know by sight but not by name, and he is carrying a bundle that is only slightly smaller than yours, and his face when he sees you is the face of someone who's been counting down from 6 days to 0 and has just reached 0. You take his hand. It is cold. His fingers wrap around yours with the particular grip of a child who has been managing without this for a long time, and is extremely relieved to stop managing. Mr. Holt signs the discharge papers. There are 2 copies. You take yours. Miss Marsh, he says. You look at him. The board will note your service here, he says, in the records. It will be noted that you demonstrated exceptional diligence and particular numerical aptitude. This is, in the language of the Victorian institutional record, an excellent reference. You understand this. Thank you, Mr. Holt, you say. He nods. He's already looking at the next paper on his desk. You pick up your bundle. Thomas picks up his. You walk to the front door of the Lambeth Workhouse, which is a heavy wooden door in a heavy stone door frame, and you push it open, and London comes through it at you all at once. The cold hits first. January cold, sharp and uncompromising, with the edge of the river in it and the coal smoke of a million chimneys, and underneath both of those something that is simply the cold of open air, the cold of the sky above a city rather than the cold of a basement stone floor, a different quality of the same temperature. Then the sound. The street sound, which is the most complete contrast to the institutional quiet of the workhouse interior. Carts, voices, a dog somewhere, the clop of a horse, a woman calling from a window above, all of it simultaneous and unordered and gloriously uncontrolled. Then the light. January light in London is not generous. It is thin and silver and comes from a sky the colour of old pewter. But it is outside light, directional, casting actual shadows, and after 23 weeks of the laundry's diffuse steam grey and the dormitory's narrow moonlit window, the outside light is extraordinary. Thomas stands beside you on the pavement, and his head turns left and right, and his grip on your hand tightens and loosens as he looks at things. All right, you say. Yes, he says. He sounds slightly stunned. This is appropriate. You have 2 shillings given to you by the workhouse upon discharge, a practice for outgoing inmates that the Board of Guardians instituted 3 years ago on the recommendation of a charitable committee concerned with the recidivism of discharged paupers, most of whom returned within a year because the 2 shillings was insufficient to establish any kind of foothold. 2 shillings is not enough to prevent returning, but it is enough for the omnibus to Kennington, with something left over. The omnibus stop is 4 streets away. You know this from the window of Mr. Holt's office, and from the view it gave you of the street's geography. You walk toward it with Thomas beside you, both of you carrying your bundles, walking through a city that does not notice or care about your particular circumstances, which is the city's great indifference, and also, right now, its great gift. Thomas does not let go of your hand. The omnibus is a horse-drawn vehicle, open on the sides with wooden benches, and it covers the distance to Kennington in 40 minutes through the morning traffic of South London, and you sit in it with your bundles on your laps and your brother beside you, and the city going past at a height slightly above street level, which gives a different perspective than walking, a slight elevation that shows you the rooftops and the second floors of buildings and the flow of the traffic rather than just its immediate presence. Thomas looks at everything. He looks at the street markets with their coloured awnings. He looks at the pie men and the flower sellers and the newspaper boys and the horses and the carriage traffic. He looks at a man with a performing monkey on a chain, which is something he has never seen before, with an expression that is equal parts delight and uncertainty. He looks at a chimney sweep barely older than himself, face black with soot, carrying his brushes over his shoulder, walking with the specific tiredness of someone who's been working since before the light. He looks at the sweep and then he looks at you. You look back. Neither of you says anything about this, but the look says what it says, which is, there but for the specific arithmetic of your situation, there but for the tally book and the sub-columns and Mr. Carrow's attention and Mrs. Holbrook's inquiry, there but for the series of small, careful things that created a direction, and the direction created a possibility, and the possibility created this omnibus this morning, this hand in yours. You squeeze his hand, he squeezes back. Kennington. The omnibus driver calls it, and you collect your bundles and descend to the street, and you are here. The Holbrook premises is a narrow-fronted shop on a street of narrow-fronted shops, the kind of street that is not grand but is respectable, the kind of London street that forms the backbone of the city's commercial life without appearing in anyone's description of it. There are 3 steps up to the door. A painted sign above the window says Holbrook and Son, Linen Drapers, established 1857. The window has a display of folded fabrics in various colours, arranged with the careful attention of someone who understands that window dressing is part of selling. Mrs. Holbrook opens the door before you knock. She looks at you and at Thomas with an expression that has already been calibrated for this, that is neither overly warm nor formal, but is simply ready. This is, you will learn, her characteristic quality, readiness, the preparation for what is coming rather than the reaction to what has arrived. "Miss Marsh," she says, and this is Thomas. "Yes," says Thomas before you can speak, with the forthrightness of someone who has been anticipating this moment and sees no reason to defer it. "Come in," Mrs. Holbrook says. The shop smells of cloth and sizing and the faint, warm smell of the coal stove that sits at the back of the retail floor. There are shelves from floor to ceiling on both walls, bolts of fabric in rolls, all colours, all weights. The counter runs the length of one wall, solid wood, scarred with years of measuring. Behind the counter, a young man who is apparently Son in Holbrook, and Son, perhaps 20, with his mother's directness in a slightly more hesitant form, is arranging a new delivery. "This is James," Mrs. Holbrook says. James nods. "We've been waiting," he says. He means it factually, without complaint. "Father's in the back with the ledgers. You put your bundle down. Thomas puts his down beside yours. You look around the shop with the specific attention of someone who is beginning to understand a new space, cataloguing it, finding its logic, locating where things live and why. The ledgers are in the back office. You can already see from the doorway that they need the kind of attention that produces relief in the person who has been managing them inadequately, rather than resentment at the intrusion of competence. Mr. Holbrook's handwriting is, as promised, a challenge, but the system is there underneath the illegibility, a system that was organised at some point and has since been allowed to accumulate the sediment of 4 months without a bookkeeper. "I can start this afternoon," you say. Mrs. Holbrook looks at you with the expression that you will come to recognise as her version of approval, which is the absence of correction. "The room is upstairs," she says. "Let me show you." The room is above the shop and is accessed by a stair at the back of the building. It is modest in the way that the word modest exists to describe rooms that are small and simply furnished, but are clean and private and have a window. The window faces the backyard, where there is a wash house and a vegetable patch that is currently dormant under January ground. The room has 2 narrow beds, a small chest of drawers, a washstand and a fireplace that Mrs. Holbrook says is lit in the evenings. The walls are papered in a pattern of small flowers, faded, that someone put there at some point in the history of this room as an assertion of something, of the desire for things to be more than merely functional. Thomas goes to the window. He looks out at the backyard. He looks at the dormant vegetable patch, which has the brown, patient quality of things waiting for spring. He looks at the wash house. It's small, he says. It's ours, you say. He turns from the window and looks at the room. 2 beds, a fireplace, a window, walls with faded flowers on them. He sits down on the nearest bed and bounces experimentally on it, and the springs respond, and he looks at you with an expression that is the first fully unguarded expression you have seen on his face since before your mother died. It's got springs, he says. Yes. He bounces again. The workhouse beds didn't have springs. No. They were like lying on the floor. Yes. He bounces a 3rd time with the systematic quality of someone establishing data. Then he stops and sits quietly on the bed and looks at the faded flower wallpaper. And outside you can hear London going on with its business, and the coal stove in the shop below is a faint warmth that rises through the floorboards, and the room is cold, but not as cold as it will be tonight, and not as cold as the dormitory, and you are here. You are here. The afternoon finds you in the back office with the ledgers. 4 months of inadequately maintained accounts, invoices unfiled or misfiled, payment records incomplete, the running totals on the right-hand columns sometimes present and sometimes not, depending apparently on the mood of whoever was managing them. You sit at the desk with a fresh notebook beside the ledger, and you work through it methodically, going backward from the most recent entries to find the last point of confirmed accuracy, and then forward from there, reconstructing what the correct figures should be. It is not entirely different from what you are doing in the laundry. It is the same cognitive action, finding the pattern, finding the error, correcting toward accuracy. The environment is different. The desk is solid wood, and the chair has a cushion, and the stove in the corner keeps the room at a temperature that does not require you to breathe through your nose to stay warm. Your hands are not in water. Your shoulders are not performing the wringing motion. There is no alkaline smell, no steam, no sound of paddles against cloth. But the action of the mind is the same. You work until supper. Supper is in the kitchen at the back of the house, a room that is the same size as the shop office, but arranged for living in rather than working in, with a table that seats 6 and a range that Mrs. Holbrook cooks on, and that gives off the kind of enveloping heat that makes a room feel like a destination rather than a location. Mr. Holbrook is already at the table when you come down, a quiet man whose presence at supper reveals more personality than his professional manner suggests, a man who has small opinions about bread and large opinions about the state of the Kennington Road, and whose fondness for his wife is present in the way he passes her things before she asks for them. James sits across from you. He is the kind of young man who has not yet decided how to be around people he doesn't know, and so defaults to formality while clearly preferring ease, and you can see him relaxing incrementally over the course of the meal as the conversation establishes itself. And he determines that you're not going to require anything formal from him. Thomas sits beside you. He eats with the focused application of someone who's been eating workhouse porridge for 23 weeks and finds the contrast to a proper supper almost overwhelming. He's very quiet during the meal, which is not like him, but it is the quiet of someone who is absorbing a great deal of new information rather than the quiet of discomfort. At one point, Mrs. Holbrook asks him a question about the school, whether he's looked forward to it. Thomas looks up from his plate. "I'm ahead of most of the others," he says, in the carefully calibrated tone of someone repeating a fact they've been instructed not to say too loudly. "In reading." Mrs. Holbrook looks at him with a quality that softens the directness. "That's a good problem to have," she says. "The solution is more books." Thomas considers this with the seriousness it deserves. "More books," he says, as if entering it in a ledger. "We have some," she says. "Upstairs. There's a shelf in the sitting room." After supper you go back to the ledger and you work until 8, and the figures begin to resolve into their correct relationships, the debits and credits finding each other across the months of disorganization. And by 8 you have the accounts reconciled to the end of November and a clear picture of what December needs. You close the ledger. You put your pen down. The ink is dry on your fingers, a dark blue-black that has settled into the whorls of your fingerprints, and you look at your hands in the lamplight of the office, and they are your hands. The scar from the copper on the left forearm, the knuckles still bearing the ghost of cracks from the laundry work, but the hands themselves performing a different action, holding a pen rather than a copper hook, turning ledger pages rather than wet cloth. The same hands, different work. You go upstairs. Thomas is already in his bed. The fire Mrs. Holbrook said would be lit is lit. A small, cheerful fire that makes the room considerably warmer than the workhouse dormitory, and casts a moving light on the faded flower wallpaper that makes it look almost pretty. He is reading. He's found the shelf of books and selected one, a small cloth-bound volume that you can't read the title of from the doorway, and he's lying on his side with the book propped against the pillow and his lips moving slightly, which he does when he is reading something that requires effort. You get into your bed. The springs respond to your weight the way Thomas said, with a give and return that is entirely different from the compressed straw of the workhouse cot, and you lie on your back and look at the ceiling of this room, which has the paper with the small flowers on it going all the way up, and the fire makes a soft crackling sound, and outside London makes its nighttime sounds through the window. Thomas reads for another 20 minutes, and then you hear the book set down and the small settling sound of him adjusting in the bed, and then his breathing changes, the gradual deepening that means sleep is coming, and you listen to it, and it is the best sound in the world. You do not sleep immediately. You lie on your back in the small room above the linen drapery in Kennington, and you're not tired in the way you are tired every night in the workhouse. The total depletion of a body that has been asked to do too much for too long. You are tired in the ordinary way of someone who has had a long and significant day, and whose body is making a reasonable request for rest. This is a different kind of tired. You think about the workhouse, and you find that you can think about it directly, without the need to not think about it. That was part of how you survived inside it. From outside, it is a specific place, behind you, occupying a specific period of your life. Inside it, it was everything. The totality of the world as you experienced it, the stone floors and the steam, and Mrs. Garvey's ledger, and Francis's careful pride, and Edith's arthritic hands, and the nightgowns from the hospital, and the mangle, and Harriet, and the copper, and the scar on your arm. From outside it is also all of those things still, and you do not look away from any of them. You think about Francis and her mother. You decide, lying in this bed with its springs, that you will write to Francis. Mr. Tibbets can forward letters. He told you as much, and you will use the skill that your mother gave you, the one that your father gave you by bringing home the newspaper, the skill that Mrs. Garvey recognised in the tally book, and Mr. Carrow recognised in the sub-columns, and you will write to Francis in the clear, careful hand that you have been developing since you were 6 years old, and you will tell her what Kennington is like, and you will ask about her mother's cough, and you will keep the thread between where you are and where she is, because the thread matters, because the people in that room were real and specific, and their lives are continuing, and you are part of them for 23 weeks, and they were part of you. You think about Thomas's face when he discovered the springs. This is the kind of small thing that a whole life can balance on, you think. Not the grand gestures, not the dramatic turns, but the spring in a mattress that makes a child bounce and look up at you with an unguarded face, and the way that moment contains everything. The workhouse and before the workhouse and the plan and the direction and the 23 weeks of careful columns and the burn on your arm and the 30-minute Sundays. All of it was in his face in that moment, though he didn't know it and you didn't say it. The fire crackles. London settles into its nighttime self outside the window. The sounds changing register the way they do after 10, becoming less commercial and more personal. The tavern sounds and the distant music and the footsteps of people going home and the watchman's call somewhere 2 streets over. You are warm enough. This is not a small thing. You are warm enough and fed enough, and in a room that is yours and your brother is asleep 3 feet away from you, and tomorrow the school is 2 streets away, and the ledger needs 2 more days to fully reconcile, and the shop window needs refolding according to James's account, and there are things to do, and the things to do are not laundry, and they are yours to do. This is enough to build on. This is, in fact, more than you had 2 months ago, more than you had 6 months ago, more than you had when your mother died and you were in the room above the chandlers with 4 shillings and 7 pence and a problem with no immediate solution. You did not solve it elegantly. There was nothing elegant about any of it. There was the workhouse and the cold floors and the hospital nightgowns and the steam burns and the careful tally books and the 30-minute Sundays and the whole slow, grinding machinery of getting through. And at the end of all of that there is this room and these springs and the sound of your brother sleeping. You close your eyes. The fire makes its sounds. The city makes its sounds. Thomas breathes. Spring comes to Kennington in the way spring comes to all of London, gradually and then suddenly, the way the city absorbs the change of season, not through any single dramatic transformation, but through the accumulation of small ones. A Wednesday in February when the light through the office window is different, slightly warmer in its angle. A morning in March when you open the shop and the air outside is not cold in the January way but merely cool. A different category of temperature. A day in April when the vegetable patch in the backyard is no longer dormant but has small green things pushing up through the brown earth, which Thomas notices and reports with the specificity of a person who has appointed himself observer of this particular patch of ground. Thomas starts school on a Monday in February. The school is exactly 2 streets away, and he walks to it in the morning and home in the afternoon, and on the first day you walk him there, and on the second day he tells you he can manage it himself. He is ahead of most of the others in reading, and this time he does not say it with the careful calibration of someone managing how it sounds. He says it with the matter-of-fact pleasure of someone who is good at something, and is in an environment that allows being good at things to be good rather than complicated. He finds his footing quickly. He has always been, you realize, better at footing than you are. Lighter in his landing, more instinctively social, capable of the quick, warm connection with new people that you've always had to work at. By the 3rd week he has friends, a cluster of them. Boys from the street and the surrounding streets who are drawn to him the way people are drawn to someone who combines genuine interest in others with the quality of being entirely himself. You watch him go in the morning with his schoolbook under his arm and his cap slightly sideways because he cannot be persuaded to wear it straight, and you feel something that does not have a simple name. something composed of relief and pride and the particular sharp edge of knowing what it cost. The 23 weeks of cold floors and careful columns, the specific price of this ordinary morning. The ledger is fully reconciled by the 3rd week of February. Mr. Holbrook looks at the reconciled accounts with the expression of a man who's been carrying a weight and has put it down. This, he says, pointing to a figure on the right-hand page. Yes, you say, that's what it should be. I thought it was that, he says, but I couldn't. He gestures at the months of inadequate record. I couldn't make it come out right. The supplier invoices for October were misfiled, you say, under November. That's where the discrepancy was. He looks at you. Then he laughs, which is surprising. A short, genuine laugh. The laugh of a man who's just learned that the problem was simpler than he feared. October, he says. October, you say. James is easier than you expected. He is 20 and has been in the shop since he was 16, and knows it thoroughly in the practical sense, knows the stock and the suppliers and the customers and the rhythm of the business, but has no head for the administrative side and is entirely aware of this, and has no ambivalence about your competence filling the space his lack of it left. He treats you with the particular respect of someone who recognizes a skill they don't have and are glad someone else does. He also, within a month, adopts a kind of ease with you that is not quite friendship. He is your employer's son, and the awareness of that is present, but is the ease of someone who has decided that pretending formality in daily proximity is simply inefficient and has abandoned it. He teaches you the window display, not because you ask, but because one afternoon you're looking at it and something about the arrangement is slightly off, and you say so, not as criticism but just as observation, and he immediately agrees and explains the principle, which is that the light changes through the day, and the arrangement needs to account for where the light will be at the peak shopping hours. The morning light hits the south end of the window, he says, so the lighter fabrics go there. The colours read better in direct light. In the afternoon, when the light shifts, you want the darker ones forward. You look at the window, you look at the light. That's the same principle as the tally sub-columns, you say. Different information needs different visibility at different times. James looks at you with the expression of someone who's just had their subject described in the language of another subject, and finds this unexpectedly illuminating. Yes, he says slowly, yes, that's exactly it. Mrs. Holbrook teaches you the customers. This is a different kind of teaching from the ledger or the window display, less explicable, more to do with the reading of people, the recognition of what someone actually needs, as opposed to what they say they need, the ability to navigate the conversation between entering the shop and leaving it in a way that serves both the customer and the business. She does this teaching without identifying it as teaching, which is the most effective method. She simply includes you in the customer interactions, and you observe and begin to understand the structure underneath the conversation. The structure is, you notice, not entirely different from the structure underneath Mrs. Garvey's silence, and Mr. Tibbets's understatement and Mr. Carrow's attention. The structure is about what is being communicated through the channels that are not the words, the fabric of interaction, you think, somewhat pleased with yourself and then feel slightly embarrassed about being pleased with yourself and get back to the ledger. Winter turns to spring, turns to summer, and summer in Kennington is not the assault that summer in the workhouse laundry was, is not the copper heat in an enclosed space with 42 women and insufficient ventilation, but is simply summer, the city's summer, warm and noisy and full of the street commerce that the season releases. The vegetable patch in the backyard produces things in summer: runner beans and lettuces, and a remarkable number of tomatoes that Thomas tends with a proprietorial interest, and brings into the kitchen in handfuls, presenting them to Mrs. Holbrook with the satisfaction of someone who has converted dormant brown earth into food. You write to Francis. The first letter takes a long time to write. Not because you don't know what to say, but because the saying of it requires the navigation of the specific difficulty of addressing someone who's in the place you left, someone for whom the departure you are describing is not yet available, and you do not want the letter to be the wrong kind of consolation, the kind that comes from outside a difficulty and sounds like advice when it should sound like companionship. You tell her about Kennington, the shop, James's window theory, the vegetable patch, Thomas at the reading, the springs in the mattress, which she will understand the importance of immediately. You do not write, "I know you'll get out." You do not write, "It won't be long." You write what is true, which is, "I think about you. I think about the laundry. I think about your mother's hands and what she knows about the temperature of the rinse. That knowledge has a place in the world beyond this, and I believe that." The letter takes 3 drafts. The third one is right. Mr. Tibbets forwards it. 3 weeks later, a letter comes back. Francis's handwriting is smaller than yours, precise, formed with the care of someone who writes infrequently enough that each letter is deliberate. The letter tells you that her mother's cough is stable, that Harriet Simms's hand has healed enough for her to do the sorting, that Bridget is still at her copper, that a woman named Mrs. Finch, who you don't know, has taken the tally book and is managing it adequately according to Mrs. Garvey's standards, which is to say is managing it without comment. And at the end, in a smaller hand, as if written quickly before the decision to include it could be reconsidered, a charitable society has written to the workhouse about sewing positions. My mother has applied. We may know something by autumn. You read this in the back office with the summer light coming through the window, and the sound of James serving a customer in the shop front, and Thomas's voice in the backyard talking to the tomato plants, which he has taken to doing as a practice in persuasion. You fold the letter carefully and put it in the drawer of the desk under the ledger. You get back to work. Autumn. A year now since the beginning, or close enough to a year that it counts. One full revolution of seasons. You notice it on a Thursday morning in October when the light comes through the shop window with the particular quality of October light, angled lower, turning the fabrics on the shelves to gold for an hour in the morning, and you stand in it for a moment with your hands full of invoices for the new winter stock, and you think, a year since the workhouse, a year since the cold floor and the bell at 5:30 and the hospital nightgowns and the wringing and the burn and the copper and the 30-minute Sundays, and Mrs. Garvey's voice saying your name as a categorization. A year since all of that, and this is what a year makes. The invoices in your hands, the shop around you, Thomas at school 2 streets away, ahead of everyone in reading, learning arithmetic now with what his teacher describes as an alarming enthusiasm. The ledger in the back office reconciled to the current week. The letter from Francis in the drawer, a new one, arrived last month. Her mother has a position. A small dressmaking enterprise in Peckham wants 2 seamstresses. They go in November. You wrote back immediately. You wrote, "I told you there would be something." She wrote back, "You said a direction, not a plan." You wrote back, "Same thing eventually." There has been no response yet, but there will be. The winter stock invoices. You sort them on the counter, by supplier, by date, by amount. This sorting is automatic now, the way the laundry sorting was automatic by week 8. Your hands and your mind working together in the particular harmony of competence. The harmony that exists when a thing has been done enough times that the how of it is no longer requiring attention, and the attention can go elsewhere, to the quality of the information rather than the mechanics of handling it. Mrs. Holbrook finds you at the counter. She stands across from you, and she watches you sort for a moment, and then she says, "Mr. Holbrook and I have been speaking." You look up. "About the business," she says. "About the next few years." You wait. In the year you've known her, you've learned that Mrs. Holbrook does not offer preamble without purpose, that when she says the next few years, she means something specific by it. "James is going to take on the buying," she says. "More travel, more time with the Manchester suppliers." She pauses. That will leave a gap in the daily management of the accounts and the customer relationships. You understand what she's saying. "I am not proposing a formal partnership," she says. "Not at present. But we would propose an expanded role, more responsibility, more engagement with the customer side, and a corresponding increase in wages." You look at her. You look at the invoices sorted in their piles on the counter. "How much more?" you ask. She tells you. It is a specific number that represents an increase of 9 shillings per week above your current 12, which would bring you to £1 and a shilling per week, which is a number that exists in a different category from the 2 shillings with which you left the workhouse on a January morning with your bundle and Thomas's hand in yours. £1 and a shilling per week, and a room above the shop, and Thomas's school, and the ledger, and the window display, and Francis's mother in Peckham, with her dressmaking enterprise, and the vegetable patch in the backyard under the October sky, with the last of the tomatoes brought in by Thomas last week, heavy and red, put in a bowl on the kitchen table. "Yes," you say. It is still not a complicated answer. It still contains everything. That evening after supper, you sit in the backyard for an hour in the October dark, because the night is not yet cold enough to make this uncomfortable, and you need the open air in a way you have learned to recognize as a specific requirement, something the year in the workhouse taught you about yourself, that the open sky overhead is not a luxury but a genuine need, something the body asks for with the same directness as food or warmth. The yard is small. It is a London backyard, bounded by the walls of the neighbouring properties, with the wash-house on one side and the vegetable patch on the other, and above it the London sky, which is not dark in the way that countryside dark is dark, but is the city's version of dark, a deep navy grey lit from below by the perpetual glow of the streets, and from above by whatever stars manage to penetrate the coal smoke and the cloud. Thomas is upstairs. You can hear him through the open kitchen window reading aloud to himself in the way he does when the reading is particularly absorbing. His voice a low murmur punctuated by occasional silences where he encounters something that requires rereading. London makes its nighttime sounds around you. The city is immense. In 1868, the census of 6 years ago counted 3 million people, and the number has grown since, is growing still, the city consuming people from every direction, and making them Londoners by the simple fact of their residence in it. 3 million people in this smoke and noise and enormous grinding commerce, in the streets above the river and below it, in the grand houses of Mayfair, and the cellar rooms of the workhouse and the narrow-fronted shops of Kennington. You are one of them now. You've become, over the past year and the past weeks and the past months of apprenticeship and laundry and ledgers and letters and spring and summer and autumn, a person who lives in London, and London has made you. in the way it makes everyone who stays long enough into something shaped by its specificities, its rhythms, its particular grinding beauty. The workhouse is 3 miles away. On certain days, walking to the suppliers in Lambeth, you can see the building, the stone facade, the heavy door. You have not gone in, have no occasion to go in, but you have stood on the opposite side of the street from it twice, once in March and once in August, and looked at the building and thought about the women inside it. Bridget at her copper, Edith in the drying room with her arthritic hands and her 50 years of laundry work, Harriet with the healed hand and the mangle. The new women, the ones who arrived after you left, who are now at the sorting table and the hand-washing tubs and the preparation soak, carrying the hospital nightgowns in their rubber gloves, making the mornings begin with the cold floor and the basin and the grey porridge and the work that does not stop. You think about them. You do not look away from thinking about them. The thinking does not undo anything. It does not change their circumstances or your distance from those circumstances. But the thinking is a form of acknowledgement, and acknowledgement is what you have to offer from here, from the October backyard in Kennington, with the open sky overhead and Thomas reading upstairs. You owe them that, you think, the women in that room. You owe them the not looking away. You sit in the yard until the cold begins to feel like cold rather than night air, which is the signal you've learned to recognise, and then you go inside, up the narrow stair, into the room with the faded flower wallpaper. Thomas has fallen asleep with a book open on his chest. You take it carefully without waking him and find his page and fold the corner, which he has asked you not to do because it damages the binding, and he is asleep and cannot object, and you set it on the chest of drawers and extinguish the lamp. The room in the dark with the fire down to embers. Outside, London. You lie down. The springs accommodate. Your body knows this surface now, has learned its topography over months, knows where the slightly uneven spring is on the right side and adjusts for it without thinking. Your hands are clean, ink-stained at the fingertips from the ledger, but clean. No alkaline smell, no rubber glove mark at the wrist, no ghost of the wringing motion in the forearms. The scar on the left forearm is there under the dark, will always be there, white-pink in the precise band where the steam was. You run your right thumb along it sometimes, not from distress but from acknowledgement. It is part of the record, your body's record of a specific place and time. The fire makes a small sound, settling. You think about the year, not in the deliberate way of taking stock, not in the calculating way of someone measuring progress, but in the way that thinking happens when the day is over and the mind ranges freely over what it has accumulated. The January morning, the bundle and Thomas's hand, the omnibus, the springs in the mattress, the ledger in October misfiled under November, James and the window light theory, the tomatoes, the letter in the drawer, a direction you said, not a plan, the expanded roll, £1 and a shilling per week, and before the year, the 23 weeks, the tally book, the sub-columns, Mrs. Garvey saying, the work was yours, not the place, Francis saying, 13 years of work and it comes to this, Edith saying, the body is very obliging, Mary Doyle's nod across the copper, the mangle, Harriet's controlled voice, stop, the burn, the dressing. Miss Webb saying, keep it as dry as circumstances allow, the Sunday visits, Thomas's face through the visitor's room door, his grip on your hand, the particular slow revolution of 23 weeks, day by day, cold floor by cold floor, column by column. All of it is still there. It will always be there. The past doesn't stop existing when you leave it. It becomes the ground you're standing on, invisible but entirely present, the accumulated specific weight of everything that happened. You are 17 years old, and it feels sometimes like you're carrying more years than that. Like the 23 weeks added something to the count that mere chronology doesn't capture. Like you're both 17 and something older, something that has been through a specific school that has no name and gives no certificate, but changes what you know about yourself permanently. You know what you can do. This is the thing the year gave you, and it is not nothing. Not the specific skills, the tally book and the ledger and the window display and the letters, though those are real. But the thing underneath the skills, the knowledge that you can be put in a very difficult place with very limited resources and come through it with your brother's hand in yours and your direction intact. That you can be cold and frightened and damaged in the specific ways this kind of work damages people, and you can keep going. That the cold floor every morning is not the end of something but the beginning of the next day. You know this now. You could not know it before. You had to be in the place to learn it. This is, in its way, the education. Your breathing slows. Thomas breathes beside you in the dark, the steady, deep breathing of a child who's eaten enough supper and done his homework and is 9 years old now, 9 as of last month, with a birthday cake that Mrs. Holbrook made from a recipe of her mother's, and that Thomas regarded with the specific reverence owed to things that are both beautiful and going to be eaten. 9 years old, growing, reading everything he can get his hands on, learning arithmetic with alarming enthusiasm, writing to Clem at the workhouse, the letters going through Mr. Tibbetts and being delivered in the children's wing by whatever mechanism the workhouse allows for the correspondence of children, and Clem writing back in the unpractised but determined hand of a boy who is learning that letters are a way of staying connected to people who have left, which is a lesson he is learning earlier than most people learn it. The fire settles again. A small sound, intimate, the sound of warmth sustaining itself, outside the city, this enormous smoke-stained, river-fed, bridge-crossed, market-filled, workhouse-containing, coffee-house running, linen draping, omnibus running, fog-wrapped, spring-finding, always-moving city. It has been here in some form for 2,000 years. Roman soldiers walked the ground under your feet, laid their stones under the streets, built their walls under the walls of houses and shops and workhouses. Generations beyond counting have woken up in this city, gone about their particular business, slept their particular nights, dreamed their particular dreams. Some of them were cold. Many of them were cold. The cold is part of the city's texture. The cold and the wet and the smoke and the smell of the river at low tide. These has been constants through the centuries, through all the changes of who was cold and who was not cold, and the structures that determine the distribution of warmth. In 150 years from this October night, someone will stand in Kennington, and the streets will look nothing like this, and the omnibuses will be something Ellen Marsh would not recognise, and the workhouse will be long gone, its building converted or demolished or absorbed into the fabric of a city that keeps converting and demolishing and absorbing. But someone will stand in that street and they will be tired from their day's work. Whatever their day's work is, whatever form the labour takes in that time, you cannot imagine from this bed. And they will be making their way home, and above them will be the London sky, still the same deep navy grey lit from below, still the same coal smoke and cloud effect, though the coal and the cloud will be different by then. And they will go home to their particular room, their particular bed, the particular sounds of their particular night, and some of them will lie down in the dark and close their eyes, and the day will settle in them, the accumulated weight and motion of it finding its way into stillness, and they will breathe, and their breathing will slow, and the city outside will be its nighttime self, and they will drift, the way everyone has always drifted, in every version of this city, in every century of it, in every room and dormitory and attic and basement and back room above a narrow-fronted shop. The people of it have ended their days by becoming still, by putting down the work, by letting the sounds around them become the background of something else, something quieter and deeper and more personal than any of the day's transactions. Sleep. It does not discriminate. It comes for the merchant at the exchange in his grand house, and it comes for the woman at the copper in the workhouse basement. It comes for the child in the children's wing and the child in the Kennington room with the flower wallpaper. It comes for Francis sorting hospital nightgowns at 5 a.m, and it comes for Mrs. Holbrook reviewing the accounts in the sitting room, and it comes for Edith with her arthritis, and Bridget with her murmuring, and all 42 women in that steam-filled room. It is the great common experience, the one that belongs to everyone regardless of their position in the structures of the day. When the day is done, everyone puts down whatever they've been carrying. You put it down now. The day, the invoices, the expanded roll, the window display, the October air, the letter in the drawer, all of it set aside gently, the way you set aside the ledger at the end of the afternoon, closing the covers with the quiet finality of things that will be picked up again tomorrow and can wait until then. Your arms are not aching. Your shoulders are not burning. The scar on your forearm is just skin, just the body's record of something that is over. You're warm enough. The bed is under you with its springs and its give. The same bed for 9 months now, familiar as anything familiar can be. Outside, London quiets. Not entirely. Never entirely. There is always something moving in this city, always some transaction of the night being conducted, always some lamp burning in some window, some cart turning a corner, some watchman making his round. The city doesn't sleep the way people sleep. It just becomes a lower register of itself. But you are far enough from the main streets to be in one of those pockets of the city that approaches quiet, the residential quiet of a street where the day's business is done and the households are still and only the distant sounds of the larger streets carry, muffled by distance and walls and the particular absorptive quality of a London October night. The fire is almost out. A faint warmth still from the embers, just enough. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You are here. Thomas is 9 years old and breathing beside you and ahead of everyone in reading, and his best friend is a boy who makes himself sick for empirical reasons, and somewhere in Peckham, Francis's mother is sitting with her knowledge of the temperature of the rinse, and her hands that have spent 50 years in water, and next week or the week after there will be a position, and it will begin, and the direction that is not yet a plan will become one. You close your eyes. The sounds of the city from here are the sounds of something very large being very quiet, the way a river sounds from a distance, the way you can hear the presence of water without hearing individual drops. The city breathes. It has been breathing for 2,000 years, and it will breathe for 2,000 more. And the breathing does not depend on any individual person's participation in it. The city will continue its enormous respiration regardless. The commerce and the traffic and the fog and the river and the coal smoke and the ordinary, extraordinary daily business of 3 million people. But you are one of those people, one of the 3 million, specific and particular, this exact person, this exact body, with this exact scar on this exact arm, in this exact room, above this exact shop, on this exact street, this October night in 1868, not a category, not an inmate, not a number in a tally book. Ellen Marsh, 17 years old, bookkeeper, sister, former laundress, survivor of specific cold floors, a person who knows what she can do. Let that be enough for tonight. Let the tally book stay closed until morning. Let the ledger wait. Let the letters be written tomorrow and the window display be adjusted for the winter light when the winter light actually arrives, and the vegetable patch be put to rest under its autumn mulch, and all the things that are coming, all the things that are being built toward, all the directions that are becoming plans, let all of that exist in its proper place, which is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and not here in the dark with the fire's last warmth, and your brother's breathing, and the city settling around you like a hand placed gently on something that has been working very hard and can now, finally, stop, rest. You have earned this. The way everyone in every cold room in every version of this city has earned the end of their day. The way the copper tenders earn it, and the mangle operators earn it, and the bookkeepers earn it, and the children in the children's wing earn it, and the seamstresses earn it, and the link boys with their torches earn it, and all the people who have ever put their feet on a cold floor at 5:30 in the morning and gotten up anyway have earned it. You have earned it specifically, in your specific way. With your specific 23 weeks and your specific tally book and your specific scar and your specific brother and your specific direction. Let it come. Let the sounds fade. Let the thoughts soften and slow, the way they do at the very edge, where waking becomes something else, where the day releases its grip, and the dark behind your eyes is simply dark and not full of anything. The fire, the city, Thomas, you, good night.